5:30, and I'm going to be calling the Plan Commission November 22nd meeting to order. We do have a quorum. We have two absent members tonight. Chair Zellers has an excused absence, and also Alder Lemmer is absent. So Maurice Shepard will be a voting member at tonight's meeting. The first item of business we will have some information provided by Paul Schmidt, our technical facilitator. Paul?
Welcome to our virtual meeting. If you lose connection at any point during the meeting, you can reconnect by clicking the link or calling the number in your original email. Members and city staff, members, please activate your video and keep it on for the duration of the meeting. Staff, please activate your video when you're speaking. Please use the raise hand feature when you'd like to be recognized to speak, ask questions, or request a roll call vote. Lowering your hand will take you out of the queue. Members of the public who have registered to speak, the name you entered in Zoom must match the name you entered in registration. You will remain muted until called upon. The clerk will tell you when your time is up. After speaking, a member of the body may ask you a question. If you need to share documentation with the committee, please send it to the email listed on today's agenda. Chair, the floor is yours.
Thank you. The first item of business is public comment. Heather, do we have any individuals that have public comment? No, thank you. The next item of business is communications, disclosures, and recusals. Do any of the members have any communications for the body? If so, raise your hand. Seeing none. The next item of business is the minutes of the November 8th Plan Commission meeting. Are there any changes or additions to the minutes? If so, please raise your hand. Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the minutes? Motion by Commissioner Sondheim and second by Commissioner Hagenall. I'll assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand in opposition. The motion is approved. The next item of business is schedule of meetings. Our next regular meetings are December 13th and January 10th and January 24th of 2022. We have a special meeting scheduled for Thursday, December 9th at 5 p.m. Proceeding to the agenda now, under public hearings, we have items on our agenda that we consider as consent items. And those items are items that staff believes the application has had sufficient review to warrant approval with all the conditions placed upon it by the various city departments on which the applicant accepts those conditions. And there are no individuals who have registered to speak in opposition of the item listed. We have several items on the consent, and I will open the public hearing and read all the items and then ask for a motion. I will also include any referrals that we have on the consent agenda. The consent items include items 2, 3. Item 4 is referral. Items for consent are 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 14, and 18. Are there any items that the Plan Commission wishes to remove from the consent? If so, raise your hand. Seeing none, I will go through those items then for consent. Item number 2, Legislator 68397, 22 North 2nd Street, 12th Alder District, consideration of a demolition permit to demolish an office building. Item number 3, Legislator 67514, 22 North 2nd Street and 1954 East Washington Avenue, the 12th Alder District, consideration of an alteration to a conditional use residential building complex in the traditional residential urban district to allow construction of a 3-story, 24-unit apartment building. Item number 4 is a referral item requested by the applicant at no specific date at this point. Legislator 66117, 3340 Gregory Street, 13 Alder District, consideration of a demolition permit to demolish a single-family residence. Item number 5, Legislator 67540, 1109 Fourier Drive, Alder District 9, consideration of a conditional use in the Suburban Employment Center District for an outdoor eating area for a restaurant tavern located in a hotel. Item number 6, Legislator 67800, 222 West Gorham Street, 4th Alder District, consideration of a conditional use in the downtown core district to convert a residential tavern into a restaurant nightclub. Item number 7, Legislator 67801, 2206 West Badger Road, 14 Alder District, consideration of a conditional use in the commercial center district for an outdoor storage to allow construction of a contractor's shop with outdoor storage. Items number 8 and 9 are related. Item number 8, Legislator 67825, creating sections 28.022 to 00520, sections 28.022 dash 00521 and 28.022 dash 00522 of the Madison General Ordinance to change the zoning of properties located at 3953 to 4051 Kip Street, 16th Alder District, from Agriculture, Industrial Limited, and Conservancy District to Industrial Limited and Conservancy Districts. Item number 9, Legislator 67807, approving the preliminary plat and final plat of the replat of Tradesman Commerce Park on property addressed at 3953 to 4051 Kip Street. Item number 14, Legislator 67852, creating sections 28.022 to 00518 of the Madison General Ordinances to amend a planned development district at property located at 3402 Monroe Street, 13 Alder District, amending the general development plan and creating section 28.022-00519 to approve a specific implementation plan. And lastly, item number 18, Legislator 67873, substitute ordinance amending table 28.1-1 of section 28.132 of the Madison General Ordinances to add bicycle parking and as allowed in the front and side and rear yards setbacks, and uncovered decks allowed in permitted setback encroachments. I will again open the public hearing, close the hearing, and ask for a motion. Do we have a motion? Motion by Commissioner Hagenall, and Okay, Tony, I think you have a question?
Thank you, Commissioner. I just didn't have agenda items 2 and 3 on my consent agenda.
Okay.
Correct, or was I?
Okay. Would you like to remove that item?
Well,
Or do you have a question?
I don't personally have a problem with approving either of those, but I'm just looking at my email from Tim Parks, and I didn't see those on the consent agenda. So I just wanted to ask staff if that was a late addition or if those should have not been on the consent agenda. Thank you.
As I understand, they are, but Heather, can you respond?
Sure, thank you. Commissioner Fernandez, these were a late addition. Staff, I just sent an email about a half an hour before the meeting, so my apologies for the late addition.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have a second to the motion? Second by Commissioner Shepherd. All those, will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand. And I see no raised hand, so all the consent items and the referral item is approved on the consent agenda. Okay, so now we're moving to items that are not on the consent. The first item would be item number 10 through 13. They're all related items. And I'll read all of those together. Item number 10 is Legislator 67846, creating section 28.022 to 00523 of the Madison General Ordinances to change the zoning of property located at 216 to 222 North Midfield Boulevard in the 11th Aldermanic District from suburban employment district to traditional residential urban district. Item number 11, Legislator 68351, 216 to 222 North Midfield Boulevard in the 11th Alder District, consideration of a demolition permit to demolish 2 office buildings. Item number 12, Legislator 67515, 216 to 222 North Midfield Boulevard, consideration of a conditional use in the proposed traditional residential urban 2 district for a multiple family dwelling with greater than 60 units to allow construction of a 5-story 72-unit apartment building. And the last item in conjunction with those are item number 13, Legislator 67516, approving the certified survey map of property owned by Flagg Development and Investment Corporation located at 216 to 222 North Midfield Boulevard. First, we will have a presentation by staff, and I believe Tim Parks has information for us.
Thank you, Chair. Members of the Planning Commission, Tim Parks with planning staff. Just briefly, 216 and 222 North Midfield Boulevard. As the Chair noted, 4 requests before the Planning Commission tonight. The first, to rezone the property from suburban employment to traditional residential urban 2. A demolition permit to allow the 2-story buildings at 216 and 222 North Midfield Boulevard to be raised, a conditional use for a multifamily dwelling with greater than 60 units, and a 1-lot certified survey map to combine the 2 existing lots into one for the purposes of building a 5-story 72-unit apartment building on the property. Just briefly, the request before you is consistent with the land use recommendations in the University Hill Farms neighborhood plan, which call for the construction of residential housing on the block bounded by Vernon Boulevard on the north, Midfield Boulevard on the east, Regent Street on the south, and Price Place on the west. The residential development envisioned in the neighborhood plan is recommended to occur in 3 to 5 story buildings. The proposal before the commission tonight is a 5-story building with a step back at the 5th floor on 3 of the 4 sides of that story. The item of greatest consequence for the Plan Commission to consider, however, is the demolition of the 2 buildings. The 2 existing parcels and buildings are part of the University Hill Farms National Register Historic District, which was created almost contemporarily with the neighborhood plan, which identifies the 2 existing buildings as contributing structures in that National Register Historic District. The significance of the University Hill Farms National Register District is its collection of mid-century modern buildings in a planned post-war suburban development. And that was recognized by the National Park Service in 2016. And so we have a neighborhood plan that calls for exactly the type of development that is proposed by the applicants, who you'll be hearing from next. However, the Plan Commission should give due consideration to whether the demolition permit standards are met. The Landmarks Commission did review the demolitions at their September 20th meeting and noted that while the existing buildings themselves are not noteworthy for their architecture, they noted that the demolitions were nonetheless significant or consequential because the buildings are contributing structures to that National Register District. So the Plan Commission should give careful consideration to their demolition in determining whether or not to approve the demolition permit. I'll conclude there, and I'm happy to answer questions after the public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. I will open the public hearing and call the first speaker, John Flad, University Avenue, Madison, Wisconsin. He is representing Flad Development and Investment Corporation. John, you have 3 minutes.
Very good. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Very good. My name is John Flad. Our company, Flad Development and Investment Corp, is the applicant this evening, and we are the contractual owners of the properties at 216 and 222 North Midvale. I will make some preliminary introductory comments. I will then turn it over to Kevin Burrow, the project architect from Kanothie and Bruce, who will share our redevelopment plans with you all. Also available tonight is Dave Glusick, who is an engineer with the Veerbicker firm here in town. And David is available to answer any questions that you may have. I think Tim's introduction captured where we are. These are items 10 through 13. I may just speak to the fact that one of the conditional use items is the demolition permit. Both of these 2 office buildings are approximately 60 years old and were identified by our appraiser as functionally obsolete. There's no ADA compliance with the buildings. There is no elevator in the buildings. Technology is not wired in the buildings and so forth. I would also point out that 216 Midvale was on the market for over a year before we put it under contract here just a few months back. Our redevelopment proposal that Kevin will speak to is for 72 units, a 5-story building. And as Tim mentioned, it's entirely in harmony with the University Hill Farms neighborhood plan, and which was adopted by the city of Madison. So it's part of the comp plan as of 2016. We shared our redevelopment plans with our alder, Arvina Martin, back in August of this year. We understand Arvina will be joining the meeting tonight and that she's supportive of our redevelopment proposal. We had a neighborhood Zoom meeting on middle of October. Tim Parks happened to proctor that meeting, and I would categorize that meeting as very candid, very cordial. There was nothing contentious about it. There was no particular opposition expressed by the 2 speakers that had registered to speak at that neighborhood meeting. I would also share with the commission that via Zoom, we did have a few months back a meeting with the Hill Farms Architectural Review Committee. They were generally very complimentary relative to the site plan, the building design, and the elevations that we shared with them. We subsequently did some colored renderings that I also shared with their chair, Mike Lawton, who I believe may be speaking tonight. But the group at the Hill Farms Architectural Review Committee seemed quite supportive of what we were sharing. You should know that the rezoning that we're asking for to TRU2, the development proposal before you, either exceeds or meets all of the requirements within the TRU2 zoning category.
John, your 3 minutes is up. Thank you for the information. The next speaker is Kevin Burrow. The address is University Avenue, Middleton, with Noki and Bruce, the architect. So, Kevin, you have 3 minutes.
All right, good evening. This is Kevin Burrow with North Bruce Architects. As John was explaining to you, this is a redevelopment of these two existing two-story office building sites, is shown in the center of the screen. You go to the next slide, please. As also previously mentioned, this is an excerpt from the University Hill Farms Neighborhood Plan, where for Block C, which is where this development occurs, this has been zoned for up to 120 units of housing as straight residential, no office or retail for this particular block. So we are in compliance with this and the 3 to 5 story height. Next slide, please. Here's the overall site plan where we are gaining access to our property off of Vernon Boulevard. We have a surface parking lot, which then leads into 2 entry levels for enclosed parking, a first floor level parking and basement level parking. So we are able to achieve 70 parking stalls for the 72 unit building and then the 15 surface stalls. As previously mentioned, the building does step back on 3 sides from 4 stories to 5 stories at the uppermost level. Next slide, please. Here's a layout of the first floor where we have access for first floor parking, and then all apartments and lobby lined along the street areas, and the access to parking has been recessed at the back of the parking lot. Next slide. The 5th floor here is shown here where you can see all the step backs occur, and we have placed a community room up on 5th floor, which has views to the north up in the front area there. Yes, thank you. Next slide. As part of the extra design, we were sensitive to our immediate neighbor to the north. The currently Old National Bank, the old Anchor Bank building, has a icon in the area that we need to be sensitive to with regards to the design and character. So we have taken cues from this for the design of our building. Next slide. So here's the perspective views of this proposed development. This is a 5-story building, but it's along the street appears as a 4-story, as you can see in this perspective view, where the 5th floor has been recessed back. So we have a combination of cast stone for several areas of the building, composite siding, and then metal panel siding as well in a contemporary look to, again, be in context and character to our immediate neighbor to the north. And the palette is of similar tones, but certainly different. And we have all first floor entry units. So we have direct access to the first floor from the sidewalk on all sides of the building to really engage the activity of sidewalk. Then we have our main entry located in the northeast corner, as shown on the right side of the screen. Next slide. So here's a perspective view of the corner entry. One of the comments that was raised earlier today was with regards to the vision triangle. And we currently, due to the entry stoop, just have that concrete stoop infringing slightly into the vision triangle. But we could look at redesigning that corner such that that nose of that stoop could be recessed back to be either 23 to 25 feet back to be in full compliance with the vision triangle if necessary. Next slide, please.
Kevin, your time limit is up. Thank you for your comments. The next speaker is Michael Lawton at South Eau Claire Avenue in Madison, representing Hill Farm Association, Inc. Michael, you have 3 minutes.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. This issue deals with the block bounded by Regent Street, North Seagull, North Midvale, and the southern portion of the Hilldale Shopping Center. That's what we're talking about. I've labeled this in my memo to all of you, the Vernon Boulevard subarea, because that street is the east-west street that bisects this area. We're not objecting to John Fladd's design or site plan. They're fine. The question that arises here, I think, is summarized by Mr. Parks in his staff report. What are we going to do in this neighborhood? Are we going to preserve any of the commercial buildings? This is the second apartment project proposed in this sub-district. If this is approved, what will be the next one? Will the Anchor building go? Will the Lafayette building go? Will the other buildings that I cited in my memo that are on Vernon Boulevard or Midvale or Regent go as well? This was a planned community, the whole Hill Farms neighborhood, and there was originally planned that there would be a relatively low-density commercial district with services and offices in this particular area. And I guess it falls to the Plan Commission and the council to decide whether there are going to be additional rezonings that might result in basically this trend continuing. Our request is at the end of my memo, which is that any further rezonings or demolition permits in this area should have to undergo a much more rigorous review to see whether these commercial buildings can be saved for the future, or whether the commercial space can be replaced by either new commercial buildings or combining it with residential in the upper floors. I think it's very important for the Plan Commission and the council to speak to that issue, because otherwise I think we are going to end up with this entire commercial district going away and with it all being replaced by apartments. And that was not the University Hill Farms plan. And the National Registry District, I believe, confirms that. So I would ask you to take a careful look at that issue and I guess basically communicate your goals in this regard for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. And I forgot to say that he's speaking neither in support or opposition as his comments indicated. The next speaker is Andrew Kesenik in support at South Whitney Way, Madison, Wisconsin, associated with Associated Physicians. Andrew, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Yes. I'm representing Associated Physicians. Our property, if some of you can picture it, abounds the proposed project on 2 of the 4 sides of the building, or of the property boundaries. The Fladd project has 2 sides of it that are on public streets, and the other 2 sides share boundaries with our property, which is a medical clinic, Associated Physicians, which used to have a surface parking lot as part of its development. And as of today, we cut the ribbon on the new parking garage, which has just been built on Price Place and Vernon Boulevard, which will be the west boundary of the Fladd project. So I wanted to let you know that we've met with Fladd. He has answered all of our questions to our satisfaction. We support his project. We think it's a good use of that particular site. We agree that those 2 existing office buildings are at the end of their economic and probably physical lives. So we're glad to see that something newer and more modern is coming. And we think the apartment buildings will fit in within the block, with our specific block, not necessarily across the street as Mr. Lawton was referring to, but and this also maybe addresses Michael Lawton's comments that we plan to stay in our building, or maybe a more modern version of it down the road for many decades to come. We've just finished that parking garage, which is meant to expand our clinic use into the future. So Mr. Fladd and we will be neighbors for a long time if his project gets approved. We don't have any concerns with Mr. Fladd. We know that by reputation, he builds high quality buildings and they're well managed. So we're also comfortable in that regard. We only have one primary concern, and it's not a concern that we have any evidence that there's a problem, but we just want to bring this to the Plan Commission and actually to the planning staff and the engineering departments be aware of this, that there is significant flooding in that area. water table is high, the street's pitch. In fact, the difference in elevation from the south to the north side of our own property is about 15 feet. This parking garage we've just completed building, the lowest level now is about 10 feet below the elevation of the current surface parking lots of the buildings that are going to be torn down for the FLAD project. We just want to make sure that whatever is built there, that the drainage, water management and so forth does not negatively impact our property, which now has a wide open a sidewall that's going to share the property boundary with theirs that goes down into a fairly deep hole that's the lower level of the parking garage. So I guess we would respectfully request that in some form or fashion, if the Plan Commission could include as a condition of approval that FLAD will agree to work with Associated Physicians to address and resolve any drainage concerns that the Associated Physicians or its engineer consultants may have as we review more detailed engineering, landscape and site plans. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Your time limit is up. We have two individuals that have registered but do not want to speak. Lane Larson at Chieftain Lookout in Madison. And he's opposed, but does not wish to speak. And David Glusick, Foyer Drive in Madison, in support and representing FLAD Development, and is available to answer questions. Do any of the commission members have questions for any of the registrants? If so, please raise your hand. Yes, Tony.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Cantrell. I have, the staff has asked us to look closely at the historic issues. So I just wanted to ask a question,
Probably of Mr. Flad. Has there been any discussion to this point of documenting the value of these? From my experience on major highway projects, if something is a contributing resource in a National Register district, even if it's not particularly distinctive historically, it still has importance, and it has importance both to professional historians and perhaps even to the community. So I'm wondering if there's any discussion of some way to mitigate the loss of those buildings, their historic value, either through documentation, historic photo documentation, or something like that would in some way recognize that they're contributing elements of an historic district.
Well, I guess my polite answer would be, as I think Tim Parks stated, they are not historic in and of themselves. They are, quote unquote, contributing to the neighborhood as examples of mid-century modern architecture. Candidly, the building at 222 North Midvale is more of a traditional, a little more Gothic with columns out front.
Yeah.
The building at 216 had an addition added on in the somewhere in the 60s, and they added a mansard roof, which was used quite a bit back in the 60s, that typical architectural style. So there's nothing particularly architecturally or historically redeeming about either building. And so here we find ourselves 60 years later with, as Andy Kesnick said on behalf of Associated Physicians, the buildings have really outlived their useful life. The understanding I had was that this historic national district was generally earmarked because it was meant to encourage the single-family homes within the greater Hilldale neighborhood to capture, if you wanted to expand your house or if you wanted to put an addition on your house, the tax credits would be made available to you to do such a thing, to maintain the mid-century modern character in that neighborhood. These office buildings are illustrative of buildings that were built and designed 60 years ago, and candidly don't add anything in particular that I can see to mid-century modern architecture. If you want to look at something, you look at the Anchor building, now Old National. Don't want to touch that building. That captures a lot of flavor from mid-century modern. So the buildings themselves, we don't have pictures that are in the presentation, but there's nothing either architecturally redeeming or historically significant about either building.
Do you have any follow-up, Commissioner Fernandez?
No, thank you. I mean, I won't miss either of them.
I spend a lot of time, but that's not my role here. So I'm just trying to inform myself. I'm also not a professional historian, so I am just interested in how these might be contributing to that district and why. And so that was a very helpful answer to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Alder Hack. Alder Heck.
Oh, now I'm unmuted. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
This is probably for Mr. Flad. I'm curious if you have any thoughts about the previous speaker and the issue of stormwater and needing to work together. Did you have any concerns about such a condition that he was suggesting, and or problems with working together in the future on that?
No, I truly don't. And Dave Glusick the engineer with Veerbicker could probably amplify my comments, but we worked closely, and David had a in-depth conversation with Greg Fries in your engineering division. Greg has kind of been the go-to guy on stormwater management, state-of-the-art. There was an exhaustive watershed study done by the city in this whole area, because this area does have flooding that we have experienced with other properties we have in the area. And the corner of Vernon and Midvale is certainly no exception. I would tell you, after the conversation that David had with Greg Fries in engineering, they reaffirmed a first floor elevation of 898.6. 898.6 is about 5 or 6 feet higher than the road grade at Vernon and Midvale. And when I questioned it weeks back, because the building almost feels like it's going to be sitting out of the ground, and if you looked at our site plan closely, or perhaps the grading plan, you would see that it necessitated not just stairs on the northeast corner of the building, but ramps to tie in with the existing public sidewalk. So in addition to what David could share with you about stormwater structures to deal with the stormwater, we have pervious and impervious concrete. The water all flows out towards Vernon, down to the major catch basin in Vernon. And so we're happy to work with Andy and the people at Associated Physicians, because our water is either being contained on our site and will be released slowly or held for a period of time, and will be of no impact on our friends from Associated Physicians.
Thank you. That's my question.
Thank you. Are there any other individuals on the commission that have any questions? If not, I'll close the public hearing. Do we have questions for staff? Yes, Commissioner Soltheim.
I have a question for Tim. Regarding kind of the points about the historic district, in reviewing the National Register description for that area, it does mention that, when that district was created, it was really pretty much the same as it was in the 60s. So many of the buildings were still there. And I also recall from, I think it was when we were looking at maybe the TOD overlay, that national district is very large. So I guess I was just wondering if within the neighborhood plan or another document, was there any description of specific buildings that may be more important to preserve in the future, or is that something that an effort that would still need to be done, or where that would be appropriate? I'm just asking because it seems like you could say that a lot of buildings in that district are contributing if there hasn't been a lot of redevelopment of that area. So I'm just trying to think, since this is a national district and not local, kind of what would be the appropriate way to identify some of the more key buildings within that area that should be considered for preservation.
Tim, could you respond, please?
I can certainly try. Don't want to be a poor proxy for Heather Bailey, our preservation planner. I think, generally speaking, there's pretty broad concurrence that the Old National Bank, formerly the Anchor Bank building, is of great historic significance in that area. It's both a historically significant building for its mid-century contributions, and it's also probably one of the more unique buildings all around our fair city. So I think there's pretty broad acceptance that is a potential landmark. It has not been landmarked yet. It will need to potentially be landmarked, and someone not named Tim Parks would need to make an application to make it a landmark. I don't think we have ranked or reviewed specifically all of the buildings in the University Hill Farms commercial edition for which ones have the greatest value to that district. It is, I can report that excuse me one moment. Sorry about that. Real life in the background. Where was I? There is generally a sense that the way to ensure that the fabric of the University Hill Farms National Register district is preserved would be to create a local district for it, something that would be governed by Chapter 41 of Madison General Ordinances, Historic Preservation Ordinance, that would get the Landmarks Commission involved in protecting these buildings. It's fair to say that the National Register District really confers two things. It's honorary, and I certainly don't want to get in trouble with any of our viewers who are preservation minded, but it is honorary, and it confers the opportunity to get tax credits for restoration. Whereas something that would be, governed by the Historic Preservation Ordinance, by the Landmarks Commission, alterations to those buildings, certainly the demolition of those buildings, would be under the purview of the Landmarks Commission and would really afford the highest level of protection, certainly compared to a national district, which has a much lower level of protection afforded. But in terms of back to the original question about, what we know, the neighborhood plan and the study that went towards the National Register District both acknowledge the value of the Anchor Bank building. In the neighborhood plan, there aren't as many other buildings that are recognized. So I don't know if Heather Stouter has anything that she would like to add, but that's my sense of that.
Thank you, Tim. As Tony mentioned earlier, I don't feel strongly about these two buildings, but I was more asking, because of one of the speakers' questions about kind of where do we go from here and how do we evaluate this in the future. So that was very helpful. Thank you, Tim. That's all I have.
Thank you. Commissioner Fernandez?
Yeah, thank you. This is just a question. So specifically in regard to Michael Lawton's comments about the, I guess, shall we call it the slippery
slope to removing more commercial buildings. Is staff concerned about that in any way? Do you feel that the zoning and planning documents in place right now are adequate to, I think there was a specific request that future proposals in this area go through a different level of review or something like that. I don't remember exactly, but do you have any comment on whether there is any need to create any conditionality here, or whether the protection against that slippery slope is adequate as it is?
Well, the demolition permit standards provide the Plan Commission the opportunity to consider a report submitted by the preservation planner and or the Landmarks Commission. And our practice is that demolitions are routinely reviewed by the Landmarks Commission prior to the changes to Chapter 20 or Section 28.185 in September and October, which changed the demolition permit standards to what we have today. The Landmarks Commission provides an advisory recommendation, and the Plan Commission is always asked to give it, careful consideration. However, that's not conferring landmark status, and there could be other reasons why the Plan Commission could find that a demolition permit meets the standards for approval, despite even a strenuous recommendation from the Landmarks Commission. The bottom line is the way that the integrity of the national district, at least the commercial component of the National Register District, would be preserved, would be by effectively a community-based, a grassroots effort to create a local historic district here that would confer a much greater degree of protection for these buildings than what you get from a National Register designation, which is, again, more honorary than anything, and affords the opportunity to unlock state historic tax preservation credits. If someone wanted to invest in the restoration of one of these buildings, because it's in a National Register district, would be able to tap a state tax credit program to help underwrite some of those costs. But that doesn't prevent demolition, and it doesn't prevent even significant alterations to these buildings being changed. And I'm only saying this as a hypothetical because I think it's relevant. These buildings could be significantly changed under the existing suburban employment zoning, and it wouldn't necessarily require any review by any boards, committees, or commissions in order to do it. These are two-story employment buildings in an employment zoning district that, there could be some things that would be done to them that, could potentially be viewed, at least by some, as eroding the integrity of the district by the changes. If, they were, changed from that mid-century architectural representation to something that was, decidedly different than that. So the best way to protect these buildings would be to create a local district. Other than that, the process is basically what is spelled out in the zoning code. There's not really a way to amplify that under the existing standards that we have.
So, yeah, Tim, thank you. Very useful information. But I apologize. I don't think I stated my question very well, because this one was not really in regard to the historic. I think that his concern was that the business uses would disappear in favor of 100% residential. I should have stated my question better. So my question was not really with regard to loss of more historic properties, but loss of the businesses in that district. And I'm asking whether you feel like there is sufficient protection for those right now.
There would be nothing preventing somebody from proposing a mixed-use building here. I think that the proposal that's before you and the project team's defense of their proposal is reasonable, because the University Hill Farms neighborhood plan does primarily recommend residential. Kind of, stepping up one level, though, the comp plan recognizes this entire block for community mixed use. A mixed use building that had a predominant residential component in a 3 to 5 story building, given the community mixed use recommendation, and given the Midvale Boulevard frontage, I think would get strong consideration. Obviously, without having such a proposal in front of us, I couldn't say for certain whether it would be consistent or would meet the standards. But there, I don't think would be anything that would preclude a mixed-use building from coming forward for this site. And certainly, its commercial history would suggest that a commercial component could be appropriate. But that's not the request that's before the Plan Commission today, nor was that the case with the Hamptons project that I believe Mr. Lawton referenced in his comment over in the 4500 block of Regent Street. Just, basically the same plan recommendation, but for the next block west, which again, community mixed use in the comp plan, predominantly residential redevelopment up to 120 units on that block west of Price Place. But again, in this case, a mixed-use building might be appropriate.
Any other questions, Commissioner Fernandez?
No, thank you. Really, I guess what I really would be
Concerned about is too many residential only developments. And I think that's what Mr. Lawton was concerned about, that these two, this one and the previous one, were not mixed use. They were 100% residential. And his concern was, is this the pattern that we're going to see as 100% residential and loss of all of our commercial space? So that was the concern I was expressing. I don't need to elaborate it, but that's, I think there's value in preserving that commercial component there.
Thank you. Commissioner Spencer.
Thank you. A question, I guess, for Tim or Heather. I was just curious, and this is related to the comments from Michael Lawton about the commercial places and, sort of balancing the goals of the comprehensive plan for more residential, potential loss of commercial. But I was just curious, do somebody on staff keep like an inventory of acres of commercial or the amount of commercial space, in a certain area, and kind of monitor the changes? Because there might be loss of commercial here, but there's an addition of quite a bit of commercial up in Madison Yards way too. If just curious about inventory or just looking at that.
Mr. Parks.
I can give this a go in case. So we don't keep an inventory at a very fine grain in the planning division. Our economic development division does have access to data regarding vacant commercial space in large chunks of the city, kind of regions of the city. And I know that's not what you're asking. It's something that, we could probably figure out how to do that analysis based on our assessors' data, but I think the data would be, we'd be patching things together. It wouldn't be an easy to pull together analysis. We could pull together a great and fairly accurate analysis on recent development that's been proposed and approved from the last 5 years or so, but no, we don't have that at the fine grain that I think you're asking for.
Thank you.
But I think your point about commercial being developed nearby is a good one to consider.
Thanks.
Commissioner Alder Heck.
Thank you. I'm not sure if this is for Tim or Heather or both perhaps, but I have a hypothetical for you. Let's assume that we find the conditions met on this particular proposal, and tomorrow we receive an application for an analogous development on the site of the former Anchor Bank building that we has been brought up a couple of times. My thought is that we'd have a hard time saying no to that, and some of that is based on what Tim said earlier. There are no additional protections other than a vague consensus, perhaps in the neighborhood and amongst folks who are interested in mid-century modern architecture and preservationists, that it's a cool building. But to me, the consideration would be almost the same. Is that your impression too? Or let's say, even without that hypothetical, whether this one is approved or not approved, if there is a proposal that comes forward tomorrow, I would assume our consideration would be quite similar. Would you see any differences?
Tim, let's see, who wants to respond? Okay, Tim.
I can start. And I apologize, particularly to Commissioner Spencer. My internet died on me at the most inopportune time as you were finishing your question. So my apologies to you, and my appreciation for Heather's excellent answer, which was 100% better than the answer I could give you, which was no answer at all. Now back to our regularly scheduled programming, I hope. I think the one difference with the Anchor Bank building is we have a clear indication in our plans about the importance of that building. It's actually been identified in two plans at the sub area or neighborhood level for its importance for preservation. However, there's a unique wrinkle in the University Hill Farms neighborhood plan. The resolution adopting it basically smites the Hoyt Park area joint neighborhood plan. I think I've got that right, which is primarily east of Midvale Boulevard, but includes or did include recommendations when it was adopted only about 18 months before the Hill Farms plan that reached across Midvale Boulevard. But in order to avoid plans overlapping each other, the more recent plan invited the other plan to go back across Midvale Boulevard. But both of those plans highlight the importance of that building from an architectural perspective and encourage its preservation. I think that provides a more direct line to the demolition permit standards, which still allow the Plan Commission to consider plan recommendations in making its decision on whether or not a demolition permit meets the standards. It just cannot, this body cannot consider the future use when considering those plan recommendations. But where we have a neighborhood plan in this case that highlights the importance of a building, that might provide a little more firm ground under a Plan Commission discussion about whether or not in this hypothetical discussion, the Anchor Bank building, now Old National Bank building, should be raised.
Thanks. That's good information. And then, I mean, I know there are other buildings, some of them referenced by Mr. Lawton, that are kind of analogous to that may not appear in plans. As far as you know, is that the only building that was particularly pointed out in those plans it within this area?
That's the one that comes to mind. I would have to look and I'd have to get back to you on that, unfortunately.
Okay, but that's good information. Thank you. That was my question.
Thank you, Alder Heck. Commissioner Spencer, do you have a follow-up question? No.
Oh, did I forget to put my hand down?
Okay, I'll put your hand down. Thank you. Commissioner Spencer, or Shepherd, sorry.
Oh. Hi, I have a question for Mr. Parks. Just a comment. 7 under recommendations, you have as a condition of approval points 2, 3, and 4. They address the issue of once again flooding in the area. Do you think those comments address the issues that were brought up this evening by, the neighbors, the associate physicians, to address their flooding issues, their concerns?
I do, to the extent that I'm knowledgeable. I mean, those are recommended as major non-standard conditions by the city engineering division, which, typically when you have something in the gray box like we have there on page 7 and elsewhere in the report, that is intended to signal that it's a condition that needs to be met in order for the standards for approval to be met. It's not just something that is required by Madison general ordinances, and it would apply whether it was in the staff report or not. In this case, the fact that it has been highlighted by the city engineer, I think, emphasizes those 3 conditions, their import. And so to that extent, I feel like that is getting to Mr. Kiesnick's comments on behalf of Associated Physician.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for the city staff? Seeing none, I'll then close I closed the public hearing, I guess. So I'll ask for a motion. Do we have a motion? Yes. Commissioner Sondheim.
I move that the Plan Commission find the standards for demolition permit have been met, and for the zoning map amendment to rezone 216 and 222 Midfield Boulevard from SE to TRU2 with the recommendation of approval, and also find that the standards for conditional use were met with approval, subject to the conditions in the staff report.
Do we have a second? Commissioner Fernandez, do you second it?
Seconding it,
yes. Commissioner Solheim, would you like to speak to your motion?
Sure. I'll just say that, redevelopment of this site, I think, has been contemplated, for many years, both in the comp plan and the neighborhood plan. Even when the historic district was being created, there are a lot of contributing buildings in this district, and it seems like there are a few that probably need further review to prevent them from redevelopment. But I think these 2 parcels and these 2 buildings are a great site for redevelopment. And I support 100% residential in this area, given the amount of commercial and retail space that's in the surrounding area.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Fernandez, would you like to speak?
No, I'm in complete agreement, though.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion and a second to approve this development. I'll assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand in opposition. Seeing no raised hands, the motion is approved, unanimously approved. Thank you. Moving on to the next item is item number 15, 16, and 17, and they're all related again. Item number 15 is Legislator 67120. It's a substitute ordinance creating sections 28.022 -00515 of the Madison General Ordinances to rezone properties located at 341 State Street to 317 to 321 West Gorham Street and 322 West Johnson Street in the 4th Aldermanic District from urban mixed use and downtown core districts to planned development and creating section 28.022 to 00516 to approve a specific implementation plan. Related item 16 is Legislator 66109, 341 State Street, 315 to 321 West Gorham Street, and 322 West Johnson Street, consideration of a demolition permit to demolish 4 commercial buildings as part of a proposed mixed-use redevelopment in a proposed planned development district. And lastly, item number 17, Legislator 66600, approving a certified survey map of land owned by Urban Land Interest at 322 West Johnson Street, LLP, and McCackey Development Associates, LLP, located at 341 State Street, 315, 317, and 321 West Gorham Street, and 322 West Johnson Street in the 4th Automatic District. We will have a presentation by city staff, and I think, Heather, you're going to be presenting information.
Indeed. Thank you, Chair Cantrell. All right, I will keep this brief, and I want to thank my colleague Chris Wells for all of the time and attention to this complex proposal. Chris is on a well-deserved vacation, so I'm going to do my best to pinch hit for Chris this evening. A quick summary, and then we'll turn it over to registrants who can provide some more detail. But before you this evening is a proposed redevelopment of most of the downtown block, bounded by State, Gorham, Broome, and Johnson Streets, with a 10-story mixed-use building, 23,000 square feet of retail, and 386 residential units, including a wide variety of sizes, for a total of 1,001 beds to be marketed to students and others in the downtown. The proposal involves a demolition request, rezoning request to the planned development district, and a certified survey map to combine the underlying properties into one lot. And I think we'll focus the Plan Commission tonight, as Chris did in the staff report, on 2 main issues. First is the demolition. The applicant proposes demolition of 4 two-story buildings, 3 of which the applicant has proposed to restore the historic facades of as part of the redevelopment. And I want to note here that the Landmarks Commission in February, so many months ago, advised that the existing building oriented to Johnson Street and the 2 buildings oriented to West Gorham Street, all of which were designed and constructed in the 20s and 30s as auto showroom space, do have historic value based on their architectural significance due to their revival style commercial architecture, and historic significance due to their early automotive sales history, and finally, their status as contributing structures in an eligible National Register Historic District. So that was the Landmarks Commission advisory recommendation at the time. This district is not a National Register district, but it has been deemed eligible to be one. And then the 4th building, oriented to State Street, was constructed in the 1980s, and the Landmarks Commission found that its historic value is related to its cultural history of the LGBTQ community in Madison, but that the building itself was not architecturally significant today. And I'll mention, and the applicant will provide some graphics showing how 3 of the 4 facades have been integrated into the final iteration of the design that's before you this evening. The second issue that I want to turn the Plan Commission's attention to is part of the planned development zoning request, and that is the additional 2 stories over and above the downtown zoning maps, 8 stories, which is allowable in this area. And so as part of their request, the only way to exceed that downtown height map in the zoning code is to request a planned development zoning. And that's indeed what the applicant is requesting this evening. So as mentioned in the staff report, the massing of this almost full block building includes a 3-story element along State Street, stepping back to a 6-story element, stepping back again to a 10-story element. And the massing is broken up by several structured usable open spaces and green roofs on various levels. The planned development zoning has standards specific to applications seeking approval for excess height, including one, and that is that the project is a higher quality building than it would be absent the additional height. And the applicant has focused on 6 items that they feel are really relevant to this standard, and that they mention may not be able to be incorporated in an 8-story version of the building. I'll run through those 6 items, First is the incorporation of a 3-story facade along State Street rather than the allowable 4-story facade. And staff believes that this 3-story facade is more in line with the surrounding predominant 2 stories in the area. Second, the reconstruction and integration of the 3 historic facades. And this is in response to that Landmarks Commission advisory recommendation I mentioned. Third, the incorporation of low-cost student housing. So unrelated to the Plan Commission's deliberation tonight, a separate agreement has been reached between the city and the applicant to integrate 10% of the leasable beds for income restricted to for low-cost student housing. And they'll be working in partnership with UW-Madison, who will refer students with lower incomes to the developer each year for these beds in the facility. And again, that agreement is not before the Plan Commission to be reopened this evening, but it was approved by the council at their last meeting. And so that is a part of the proposal before you. Fourth, the incorporation of various sustainability elements that the applicant will go into more detail on. Fifth, the usable open space elements far exceed that which would otherwise be required in a typical downtown district. And then sixth and finally, their efforts to incorporate an incubator space in one of the retail areas on the first floor. So again, those 6 elements of the building, program and design, are what the applicant has pointed to as the way to meet that plan development standard related to the excess height that they're seeking. From a design standpoint, it's important to mention that the Urban Design Commission has recommended final approval for the design as an advisory recommendation for the plan development and the additional height that's being sought by the applicant. Staff has reviewed the proposal very closely, and as many of you who have been with us a while know, we rarely are able to fully recommend approval for proposals that do exceed the height as shown in the downtown height map. And so that was one of the toughest parts, I think, of this review. And at the end, I think, on balance, staff believes that if the Plan Commission can find that both the demolition standards and the plan development standards, particularly the one related to excess height, can be met, then the Plan Commission should state these findings and approve the proposed demolition and rezoning, recommending that the council approve the plan development rezoning at their next meeting. And I'll be available for questions, and I believe Colin Punt will be available to support us in that as well. With that, I'll turn it back over to you, Chair Cantrell. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll open the public hearing, and I believe the first speaker for the development team is Rob Bach. He's addressed at North Milwaukee Avenue in Chicago, Illinois. He's obviously in support of the project and represents Core Campus Manager LLC. So, Mr. Bach, you have 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you so much for the thorough introduction, Heather and Commissioner Handel. Appreciate it. Good evening, Plan Commissioners. It's a pleasure to be back with you this evening, and thank you for the opportunity to present our proposed Olive Madison mixed-use development. My name is Rob Bach, I'm Development Director with Core Spaces, and we are very excited to walk you through the process, culmination, and vision of well over a year of design, planning, and coordination. And I really want to thank everyone that has provided feedback and contributed to the development of our proposal all along the way, especially including the alders, city staff, the Urban Design Commission, and the Neighborhood Steering Committee, Neighborhood Association Steering Committee, and other stakeholders interested in the future of downtown and State Street. We have worked really hard to listen throughout all these interactions, and we firmly believe the project before you this evening reflects that input and will ultimately be instrumental in making this project an excellent addition to the downtown neighborhood. We believe this is a groundbreaking project for a key block of State Street, especially considering the low-cost rent component, as well as the sustainability elements and entrepreneurial incubator programming, which really hasn't been seen in the student housing space to date. So with that, we have our full team here with us this evening from architecture and land use, and we'll be presenting these different aspects of the project in more detail. And we'd be more than happy to answer any questions to assist the commission in considering a recommendation of approval this evening. With that, I'll turn it back to the rest of the team. Thank you so much.
Thank you. The next speaker is Jeff Zalesko at Green Forest Road in Deer Park, Illinois, in support representing Core Spaces. Jeff, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes, great. Good evening, Plan Commissioners. My name is Jeff Zalesko. I'm a senior principal with Antunovich Associates. We're architects working with Core Spaces on this project. If you could turn to the next page, please. So the design has evolved based on input from the planning staff, the steering committee, Alder Verveer, and UDC. You'll see on this page, substantive changes were made to the planning and design of this building, especially based on input from UDC, where they wanted to see more recesses along Johnson Street and on Gorham Street to provide more relief, in particular to the historic facades that we were maintaining and restoring. So this was a huge impact on the building, and we really had to replan the entire building to satisfy this, but we agreed with UDC that this was an important point and something that we should really make an adjustment on. Next page, please. We followed the form-based zoning of this, and you see on this sheet here in the top right, we made adjustments from what you saw on the left side based on UDC feedback and feedback from some of the other committees. And again, as was mentioned earlier, we have only 3 floors instead of 4 floors on State Street, obviously a very important point. We also made architectural changes based on the materiality of the building. We also wanted to reinforce something that we all talked about, in particular with UDC, regarding emphasizing the multiple buildings that this looked like, really that it was evocative of the elements that already existed in this portion of the city. Next page, please. We followed the underlying zoning where we set back from the 3 floors at State Street, then back at 60 feet to 6 stories, and then back again at 130 feet to the 10 stories, the 2 additional stories, being the 2 floors that allowed us the affordable housing and all the sustainability elements that we have built into the building. Next page, please. The final UDC approval was based on finding that all of the standards from the additional height were met. So we think that that's very important. Again, substantive changes you see before on the left side and the after on the right side, changes that were made based on the feedback that we received, which we felt really improved the building and made it just that much more viable in the city. And again, you see how much we went to really build in these elements, the historic facades, and provide relief behind those, so those became even more powerful, really well-placed elements within the building. So with that, I'd like to yield my time to the rest of our team. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you. The next speaker is Susan Schmidt at Marinette Trail in Madison, and in support, and Susan is representing herself. Thank you. Sue, you have 3 minutes. Have you
Susan, you appear to be unmuted.
Okay. Susan, have you unmuted yourself?
You're unmuted on our end. You might want to check your microphone settings. Hit it again.
Susan? And is there any other assistance we can give to Susan to unmute her?
If you're on a desktop, if you click the little up arrow next to your mute button, that gives you a couple options. You can double check that your microphone is correct. Otherwise, you can log out and come back in, and hopefully we can circle back to you.
Okay, maybe we can move on to the next speaker. We'll come back to you, Susan, after Brian Munson. We have Brian Munson at East Lakeside Street in Madison, in support and representing Core Spaces LLC.
Yes, good evening, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity. Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to address the Plan Commission tonight. I'd like to take a few minutes to add some additional insights into the overview that Heather gave about the justifications for the extra height. If you can go to the next slide, please. Really, as UDC reviewed this, and again, as they granted in their final motion findings that the extra height is met, and as reflected in the city staff's comments, you can see some of the exhibits from the packet on this page that illustrate existing buildings within close proximity. Of course, the closest proximity being the Ovation building immediately across the street on Johnson Street. But then if you go to the next slide, you can see from the staff report, there are 8 buildings within an eighth of a mile of this site of taller elements than what we're proposing. And as we design this building, we really want to make sure that we are cognizant of the context around us that's both existing and emerging, and at the same time really reflect the goals of the adopted downtown plan, which was to honor and embrace State Street as a unique environment, to step up in scale away from it, and to push height onto the site closer to Broome Street. And that's exactly how we designed the building. The justifications for the extra 2 floors on this site move beyond just the context. You go to the next slide, please. And as Heather stated, really focused in on 6 different key elements that are facilitated by the extra height. Obviously, State Street being in that 1, 2, 3, and sometimes 4-story heights along its stretch, we wanted to make sure that we were filling a building in that met that. And so that's why we've lowered our heights along State Street to 3 stories, really worked hard. The design team, Jeff's team, did a great job to really articulate that facade on State Street and keep it broken into smaller bits and really match the character and context of State Street. The next element of that was the incorporation of the contributing buildings. And we heard the commentary from the Landmarks Committee on, in fact, in a letter supported, as it's part of the record, from the Madison Trust in terms of supporting the preservation of these facades to both create a unique and active streetscape that ties back to the history, but still vibrant and differentiated on both Johnson and Gorham. So the design of the building was modified based on UDC input to create greater step backs and really celebrate the buildings that are there and incorporate them into the future of the streetscape. The third element is the low and moderate income student housing. This is truly a groundbreaking agreement and a partnership between CORE, UW Office of Financial Aid, and the city. And while Rodney King will offer some more insight on this, this is unique in that it's the opportunity to deliver affordable student housing that's totally funded through the building itself. The extra height creates the financial mechanism to allow this to happen. And the agreements give the predictability and the enforcement mechanisms to carry that forward for 30 years as a land use restriction. This equates out to 112 beds with a 40% discount, or approximately $560 a month for rent. So a significant movement in the right direction towards addressing some of the needs of students with financial needs. The fourth element is sustainability. In addition to this building being designed to the National Green Building Standards, which has a variety of different systems throughout the building.
Ryan, that's time.
Okay. Thank you.
Your time limit is up. The next speaker is Rodney King at North Milwaukee Street in Chicago, Illinois, in support, representing he's managing director of acquisitions for Core Spaces.
Thank you, Commissioner.
You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Commissioners. I'll be brief as we conclude. My name is Rodney King, Managing Director for Core Spaces. I want to touch on the affordability component of the project. The affordability agreement, the low-cost agreement, has already been approved with UW-Madison, the city, and Core Spaces ourselves. This agreement was approved after extensive involvement with the city, the neighborhood associations, and the university. We are proud of this groundbreaking agreement to deliver affordable housing to downtown. Approximately 10% of our unit mix, or 112 beds, would be dedicated to the low-cost housing solution. This solution is primarily supported by the extra density, or the 2 extra floors on the building, as Brian described, not by TIF money, not by city money, or any tax credits. Just to reiterate, no public money is going to us, the developer, to facilitate this development. The low-cost housing beds are facilitated by the increased density in the form of a land use restriction So that gives this commission the comfort to know that this solution is long lasting. Lastly, I want to thank Alder Verveer and his leadership and openness to get this project to this stage. This was a very unique project with a very unique solution, and we want to thank him for his leadership on it. And lastly, I want to thank the City Planning Department and City Attorney's Office for their creative ideas to getting this project to where it is today. Our design team and our project team is here to answer any questions or address any comments that we didn't address in our presentation. With that, I'll turn it back over. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll circle back and try to get Susan Smits again. Susan, are you now connected? You have 3 minutes.
Yeah, same issue. Same issue. I can see she's unmuted on our end, but unable to hear you.
Okay.
Susan, you can call in as well if you want. That information is on the agenda.
Okay. Well, we'll circle back with Susan, and then I'll just go down some of the rest of the speakers that wish to speak. Tom Neuauer, residing on Lincoln Street in Madison, in support. You have 3 minutes, Mr. Neuauer.
Thank you. I'm Tom Neuauer. I would first like to clarify that Urban Land Interest does not own any of the properties. These are all owned by individuals in partnerships or limited liability companies. So there are 2 properties that Brad Binkowski and I own, but we own them as individual partners. I am one of 5 partners who, for as long as 40 years, have owned the properties that Core Spaces proposes to redevelop. In 1981, we purchased the former Shell oil station at the corner of State and Gorham Streets to create a retail building that we hoped would strengthen State Street in the face of suburban competition. It was a 2-story building with a full basement. We initially leased up all 3 floors as retail space, but as the retail shopper traffic on State Street declined, we found ourselves really only able to attract tenants to the first floor. In 1980, we completed the adaptive reuse of Fire Station number 2 at the opposite corner of the block, the corner of Johnson and Broome Streets, as an office building. Our partnership will keep the fire station. It is not part of Core Space's proposed project site. I'd like to make 3 points. First of all, the site of the proposed development is occupied by buildings that no longer work. 3 of them are former auto dealerships from 1923 and 1925. Their second floors have been largely vacant for many years. They lack handicapped accessibility. They were designed for retailing, but retail sales in this area have persistently declined. These 2-story buildings are a serious under-improvement of this location. Much of the site area is occupied by surface parking lots. Secondly, the proposed project will catalyze State Street's revival. It will bring 1,100 new residents to the midpoint of the street. It will also be a strong generator for a new tax incremental district. Based on the real estate taxes paid by other new student apartment projects, it will produce approximately 10 times the taxes that present uses of the site do, which would increase the real estate taxes paid by this site by up to $2 million per year. Thirdly, this project is an important opportunity for the city. A project like this requires a long period of preparation. We began talking with Core Spaces, I think, a little over 2 years ago. This is a very carefully planned project.
Tom, your 3 minutes is up. Thank you for your comments. The next speaker is Tim Camps. at West Washington Avenue in Madison in support. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. I'll be brief. Just wanted to touch on a little bit of the experience over the last, it feels like a year, but I think it's about 9 months of reviewing this project. I'm speaking in a personal capacity, but I was one of 2 co-chairs, and I think you'll hear from the other one in a moment here. So I personally support the project after careful deliberation. I think the extensive outreach and collaboration on behalf of the development team has been exemplary. They've been receptive to much of the feedback provided by the neighborhood. As you'll note in the steering committee report, there's some opposition that remains, but for myself, I'm a big supporter of this project adding to the housing supply in downtown Madison. And I think in addition, the affordability component is critical to getting that support and justifies the bonus stories in my mind. So I'll leave it at that. Hope you support the project. Thank you.
The next speaker is, thank you. The next speaker is Chuck Bauer at on Van Nuys Avenue in Madison in support. You have 3 minutes.
Yes, thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Oh, good. Yes, my name is Chuck Bauer. I'm speaking in support. And for over 40 years, my entire adult working life, I co-owned a long-term retail business on State Street in this very block, the soap opera at 319 State Street, which I co-founded in 1972. For most of that time, from 1982 to 2019, I also owned that commercial property at 319 State Street. And that building will remain. It's not part of this project. The business and the building, of course, remain intact today and functioning smoothly. We sold the business in 2016. I was also on the Landmarks Commission for 10 years, most of it as chair. So I would like to offer my thoughts from an investment, commercial, and retail business perspective that the windfall of 1,100 new residents and customers literally arriving on the doorstep of State Street represents to me a significant benefit to the local and regional community. To speak plainly, that's just hard to beat. And by way of long-term perspective, almost 50 years ago, I remember vividly the Capitol Center towers going up, replacing a jealously guarded surface parking lot, which I used regularly. And yes, change, losing parking, brought grousing. But when a microphone went in front of my face and the press asked me about that, I smiled and said, housing for customers. Now here we are 50 years later, and those improvements and many others still house customers, pay taxes, and continue to contribute. This current proposal is, at base, really no different. And it too will be an important and contributing engine to the long-term benefit of our entire community. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. The next speaker is Eve Galantner at North Roby Road in Madison in support. You have 3 minutes.
Tonight about an opportunity before you that I believe will bring some badly needed revitalization to our downtown, while responding positively to the viewpoints of residential and retail neighbors and the responses I've seen from transit, from landmarks, and the urban design referrals. I don't fit into any of those categories, but I am a longtime near West Side resident who enjoys long walks. And for many years, I've chosen downtown as a destination. It's my urban fix. with Picnic Point and the Arboretum as alternatives. But I did more than my traditional amount of walking this past year and a half, as so many did, and watched with dismay and disbelief at the decline of portions of State Street as they went from gradual to precipitous over that time. Sometimes I felt like there were more for lease signs in vacant storefront windows than pedestrians as I headed toward the square. I believe that this project can help to reverse that trend, to bring more pedestrians to a revitalized streetscape, and in turn produce more support for locally owned businesses to return and to thrive. I think it's a bonus that many of those pedestrians who are students on limited incomes will be living in those spaces. That is a wonder. I know that's not before you this evening, but that is a wonderful partnership with the UW. I look forward to all of them, to all those who will live in the proposed building, being pedestrians along with me. Yes, I look forward to the return of crowded sidewalks. And I especially can't wait to see all those old for lease signs being replaced with opening soon signs. So I urge your positive consideration of this proposal, and I'm available for any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Emil Goyle at St. Mark's Avenue in Brooklyn, New York. In support representing Campus Area Neighborhood Association.
Hi there, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, so in July 2020, my student colleagues at the Associated Students of Madison and I created a petition lobbying the City Plan Commission against, and the Urban Design Commission against the Hub 2 of Core Spaces, the developers who are presenting tonight. This is what essentially, this was the lightning spark that spurred the creation of the Campus Area Neighborhood Association, where we started to look at how students can get involved with city government and have an influence over these large development projects and other land use issues. Now, the Hub 2 is no longer under consideration. It has been denied. It has been reproposed to you and then also got rejected. But I do believe that Core Spaces, as good faith developers, have put forth a genuine effort in the memorandum of understanding that they've sort of worked out with us and the university and the city of Madison to have a development proposal that it can in some ways be accessible to students of lower income backgrounds. I feel very fulfilled working with the developers from late last year all the way through the end of this year on the various intricacies of how many floors this project would have over the State Street side, how dark, how bright the architecture would be, how the project would feel to a student day to day. And it feels to me that this proposal is a very important step forward in the direction the Campus Area Neighborhood Association was started for, which is why, even though I've obviously left the university, graduated, and am now working in New York, I look back at this and feel excited about the increased supply of housing that this development brings.
Does that conclude your remarks?
Yep, that's all I have to say, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Eli Savarsky at North Carroll Street in Madison in support with Campus Area Neighborhood Association.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Eli Savarsky. I'm the current president of the Campus Area Neighborhood Association. I took on this role shortly after Mom moved to New York. We sad to lose them all. Yeah, I'm speaking from just extensive involvement in this project and really seeing it come to what it is today. I also find peace, sort of, in a sense, to what we have presented before us through the affordability aspect of the project. There was still, of course, some qualms that people had in the steering committee. But I think a big thing that this does is it really takes a complicated part of our city and shows that through a really good process that we can come to an understanding between the neighborhoods, between developers, the city, University, Wisconsin, and other stakeholders, just to really figure out big issues like this. So I do want to directly just thank Rob, Jeff, and Brian on the development team for their just continued engagement with our neighborhood association and the Capital Neighborhood Association adjacent to us. And I would just like to say as well, in light of the low-cost housing components that was implemented through this project, and with the really great help of this city staff, that there is other developments of larger size happening in Madison on Regent Street that is being proposed, and also West Johnson Street, that I really do think should also have something considered like this as well in the city ordinances and in the downtown plan that allows for the 12-story developments to be built. But this is a testament to that work being able to be done in the city. And I think this is a call to action for all of us in Madison to really consider how we are going to offer low-cost housing to students and residents in the future. So yeah, I am grateful for how this project turned out. Could we have had more affordable housing? Maybe. But I think that this is just a small piece of the puzzle that Madison needs to really reconcile for our future. Yeah.
Thank you for your comments. We'll circle back with Susan Schmitz. Hopefully she is, we can connect her with her now. Susan, do you have a speaker?
My phone?
Yes. Susan, are you there?
Yeah, I'm on. Yeah. And my computer has been crazy all day. I'm really sorry about this. This happened early this morning too, but I'm now on my phone.
Okay, good. You have 3 minutes.
Okay, so good. Yep, I know. Thank you, Brad. Thank you so much. And thank you, Plan Commissioners. It's really a great opportunity to be here to speak to you. My name is Susan Schmitz. Many of you might know me from my time as DMI, or Downtown Madison Inc., DMI's president for 20 years. I retired at the end of 2017 and I'm currently working with Core Spaces on the amazing OLIV project, and that is who I'm representing tonight. So what I want to share with you, however, comes from my years of experience at DMI. First of all, about State Street. Our amazing street, State Street, was built over 170 years ago. It was built for people, the users, who defined the uses. In the early years, there were livery stables, breweries, and boarding houses. It transitioned into a retail district for the Madison area. And then as retail changed, so did the businesses, all being defined by the users. And along came entertainment, restaurants, bars, coffee shops, and retail that provided entertainment. One thing that never changed was the need for people to have a place to gather as a community. Along came Monona Terrace, Overture Center, which moved the needle on people wanting to live downtown. One of the best things the city did was not take away the pedestrian scale feel on the street. Sidewalks right up against the businesses. So here we are, adjusting again to the users and uses. OLIV is a project that will bring over 1,000 beds to Mid-State Street so people can call downtown home while maintaining the comforting pedestrian scale and small businesses on the street. A winning combination. We all know people always talk about not wanting State Street to change, but it has adapted to users and uses since the mid-1850s. It is still a magical street where people want to gather, live, and be entertained. all connecting our beautiful Capitol building with the UW-Madison campus seamlessly. Like all good things, we have and still need to keep nurturing State Street, and providing the housing so people can call it home is the best. Tom Neuer did a great job with the tax base and with possible new TIF district, which just remember that increment will be large enough to really push for to fund additional affordable housing, even a half mile outside of the proposed district boundaries. In conclusion, with most new developments, there's pushback because of an increase in vehicle traffic. In this case, we are talking about pedestrian traffic. I heard Eve speak about that very firmly. An increase that State Street welcomes and can easily handle, especially in the middle of State Street. So thank you very much, and thank you for your patience with my technical challenges today. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Rich Lynch at Monroe Street in Madison. In support, you have 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Well, good evening, members of the Plan Commission. I just wanted to thank you for your time and efforts tonight toward making Madison the best it can be. My name is Rich Lynch. I'm now a Madison resident for nearly 50 years, and I care very much for this city. And I want only the best, well-planned, and most impactful developments to happen, particularly those that help with solutions to challenges such as affordable housing and sensible density, those which impact the quality of life for all of us as residents. I'd also like you to know that I am chairman of J.H. Findorf & Son, and I've worked there for 37 years. So I want you to know that we've been working with Core Spaces, planning this significant project for nearly 3 years, providing budgets and constructability solutions for many of its unique challenges on a very difficult site, really all to achieve the best project possible. And we share a very successful relationship with Core. They have assembled an amazing, talented team of architects and engineers for this. The housing projects that Core Spaces develops, like the Hub and the James, are thoughtful, well-designed, and they demand the highest level of quality, which we take pride in delivering that quality. Not only here in Madison, but we work with them on other student housing projects across the country. That relationship is not the primary reason I'm here to talk with you tonight. I'd like again to stress the significance of the unique opportunity to provide affordable housing for students at the UW. In the past 4 years, I personally have chaired a collective effort involving the city, the county, United Way, along with a number of employers and funders, on an endeavor to provide low-interest funding toward increasing the availability of affordable housing here in Dane County. Our collective effort had raised nearly $12 million, and still, why not enough? It significantly raised awareness for the need to find creative solutions for those that need help. And I believe the proposed Core Spaces student housing project, with its affordable housing component, is one of those creative solutions. Perhaps most impressive is that this solution involved innovative collaboration between Core Spaces, the university leadership, the city of Madison, and the surrounding neighborhoods. That in itself sends a strong message of support. Just as impressive is the fact that this is self-funded, not requiring the often necessary public assistance funding. So I feel we have a responsibility and an opportunity here to send a message with this project. We need to support and encourage, not discourage, bold approaches and collaboration toward the need to address quality affordable housing, to support and encourage growth and private investment around the campus and State Street. We can't lose these opportunities to shore up Madison's future vitality. Finally, I want to note that these 1,100 new residences will employ between 500 and 600 jobs for construction workers. These men and women in the trades who have felt very real slowdown brought on by our current health crisis will appreciate the economic impact the jobs in the retail and entertainment venues will benefit as well. So we need you as key decision makers for Madison to join us in supporting this innovative solution. I urge you to vote in favor of the Core Spaces bold investment to provide quality, affordable housing for our students and for our city. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Abigail Burns at East Mifflin Street in Madison. Opposed. You have 3 minutes. Go ahead, Abigail.
Abigail's on the phone and on the computer, so try one or both. Abigail, if you're on the phone, click *6, please. I believe we might have missed Robert Cleary. We can try him.
Yeah, okay, we can. Abigail will come back to you and go on with Robert Cleary on West Washington Avenue in Madison in support. You have 3 minutes, Robert.
Thank you, Commissioner Cantrell. I'm Robert Cleary, co-artistic director of Canopy Dance Company, a resident company of the Overture Center for the Arts. We have deep respect for urban land interests and CORE and its transformative role in shaping downtown Madison and some of its historic neighborhoods with iconic commercial and residential developments. We regard ULI highly as creative and highly responsive landlord from whom we chose to lease our Canopy Studios housing our Canopy Dance Academy for almost 2 decades before renovating a new home this summer. ULI and Tom Newyar remained proactive even as we prepared to relocate our studios over the course of a year to make way for the ambitious development before you tonight. ULI support during COVID was significant and gave us the flexibility and help to continue connecting with our Canopy family with performances via Zoom and helped us to offer a comprehensive virtual dance academy program. I'd like to share one example of ULI initiative that really demonstrates its caring culture. Even knowing that Canopy Dance Academy would be vacating State Street Studios within months, ULI invested in and installed a state-of-the-art needlepoint ionization system on the rooftop of our building to enhance the ventilation and the air quality in our studio space so that our faculty team could safely teach its virtual classes. As you can imagine, it lifted a huge burden. We have called downtown our home for decades, and in selecting our new studio space, we renewed our commitment to the heart of our city and located around the corner from the Overture Center. We love the downtown because it's our cultural hub and because it is dynamic, and it must embrace constructive change. In the future, the skyline won't be the same, but we hope it is economically stronger and especially that it is increasingly diverse, a downtown for everybody. Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you, Robert. We'll go back to Abigail. Abigail, are you connected now? You have 3 minutes.
Abigail, you're unmuted on our end. And if you are on the phone, please click *6 to unmute yourself. Chair, we could circle back again. There's actually
there we go. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, Abigail. Go ahead. You have 3 minutes.
Hi. My name is Abigail Behrens, and I work for the Wisconsin Historical Society, and I also archive the family photos of the Robert F. Kennedy family for a year in New York City. Anyways, the reason I'm calling is because that building set on the 300 West Gorham is one of my most special, precious building sets of my university days. And I was just hoping to get a voice in. I just found out when I was trying to go down to Room 1 Zone after having not been in the campus area for a while, that to get a coffee at Room 1 Zone, and the whole thing was cleared out. I couldn't believe it. And so I was hoping that any development could occur behind it, around it, down that street, and just keeping that tiny little set of buildings. And because I also worked for, in Deadwood, South Dakota, running an old Chinatown dig there. And it's an old historical town, and they're just doing all this great stuff to preserve all the buildings in Deadwood, South Dakota, including putting a chime in and all this stuff. Well, so I just think it would be such an amazing thing to keep those little, that just little strip, because then walking on State Street on either side, kind of stumbling on that older architecture mixed in with the Singapore looking type buildings that is just basically taking over the Madison skyline would just be a nice contrast, I think. And it would really, keep me here even like decades further. So anyways, that's really all I had to say. So on the fly, thank you so much.
Thank you for your comments, Abigail. Do we have any other speakers?
We do, that have been added more recently. Shall I call them?
Yes, please.
3 others? Okay, the next speaker is Elizabeth McDonald of West Dayton Street. Opposed? Elizabeth?
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Commissioner. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
I apologize. I'm in class. I'm a paralegal student at Loyola. I'm a Wisconsin alumni of class of 2018. And I don't have a, prepared statement. I don't have only have a strong connection to Madison. It's the first and really only place I consider home. I am a community organizer, and I have made a petition that has garnered over 469 signatures as of this evening. And I just want to speak and urge the commission to oppose this proposal for the simple fact that it is not enough for what the developer is asking of the city. It is quite simply a bad deal. I personally do not think that $560 for a shared bedroom in a 2-bedroom apartment is enough or affordable for any student. I know when I was an undergrad, I paid maybe $450 for my own bedroom and bathroom, and I think that if you look at the past history of core spaces projects, I'm primarily concerned about the economic vitality. I know the pandemic has been incredibly hard on a lot of businesses, but I'm concerned about the price of the retail spaces of these developments. And if you look at Core's past projects and where in the Hub and the James, there are, large national retailers that have come in and quite honestly fundamentally changed the nature of State Street from the mom and pop shops that I knew it as back when I first came to the city in 2014 to large major retailers like NAF and Five Guys and all of these large national retailers. Further, I would just like to share that this process has been incredibly aloof to many of the residents who I have spoken to personally. While I applaud Kana and Eli and Ramal for meeting with me and trying to be diplomatic in that regard, I am incredibly frustrated that meetings were frequently rescheduled we were given short notice because of the MOU, the nature of the MOU with the developer, and to the extent that those who I spoke with in the neighborhood just quite simply gave up. There are several hundreds of us per the petition and dozens of us who were residents who quite simply threw up our hands in frustration because we felt powerless and we were quite simply outvoiced by those who wanted density for density's sake. So I will respect my time. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you for your comments. Heather, are there any other registrants? Yes, proceed.
Yes, two others. The next registrant is Bob Kleba of East Gorham Street, speaking in support.
You have 3 minutes, Bob.
Thank you, Chair Cantrell, Planning Commissioners, and City staff. My husband and I operate the Canterbury Inn at 311 West Gorham Street. We would love to continue operating this adorable 6-room hotel, but alas, the downtown plan has defined what we cannot maintain. I like to joke that when we signed our lease for 47 months, I suspected that renewing it might not be a possibility. And so it goes. When I learned of the proposed development, I endeavored to attend the neighborhood meeting and subsequent steering committee meetings. I was pleasantly surprised by how well the developer listened to the steering committee meeting attendees' concerns, and they demonstrated their attention to community concerns in several ways. I initially suggested that the facade on State Street not be built to the allowed 4 stories, but rather to the 3 stories that match the rhythm and flow of the architecture of our historic State Street. The proposed architectural plan effectively integrates 3 stories here. The developer proposed affordability as a core concept from the very start. However, I expressed my concern that the component was in a segregated part of the proposal. After this first meeting, the developer bent over backward to integrate affordability throughout the proposed development. Upon extensive collaboration with the neighborhood, university, and the city, we have a solid formula for providing affordable student housing that I hope will be emulated in further private student housing developments. Another key concept that was preserving the 2 facades on West Gorham Street and the one on West Johnson Street. I encourage the developer to persevere with this design element. When I worked with the Madison Trust for Historic Preservation to advocate for the facade preservation, some board members protested that this is not historic preservation. However, I argue that preserving these facades provides not only a more engaging pedestrian experience, but also a way to point out the location and to imagine the feel of Madison's early car culture. With the facade preservation, we can use these details to maintain a small piece of the history that keeps State Street interesting. I ask the commissioners to acknowledge the amount of collaboration the developer is committed to, addressing the concerns of many disparate parties, and to approve the proposal in front of you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Heather, are there any other? Yes, go ahead.
Yes, the final registrant wishing to speak is Hawk Sullivan of Maher Avenue in support.
Thank you. You have 3 minutes.
Hi there. Okay, thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So I'm Hawk Sullivan. I own Hawks Barn Grill on State Street. It's been there for almost 20 years. I'm hoping to be there for another 20 years. And maybe if one of my kids wants to do it, which is kind of insane, they might want to do it. And before that, I was at Amy's Cafe for 10 years. So I've been downtown for 30 years. And I think Susan Schmidt said it kind of best that, in my time downtown, I remember when La Ciel and LaVille were the only 2 big buildings downtown. Like literally, they were the only 2 big, And so I'm old enough to remember that. And I think that a lot of times people get caught up in this idea of not wanting big buildings because it's different than what it used to be and it's not charming and that kind of thing. But I think it's a false notion. I do think that businesses downtown and the community downtown, density is extremely important. And this creates that. And in this meeting, it is true that a surface parking lots, 2nd and 3rd floors of half that block are not even utilized. I think those are important factors. What I was going to say, what Susan said was that downtown, listen, it evolves and it adapts. And is it what it was in the 80s when I was a kid? No, I mean, there's no arcade downtown, and I'm super bummed about that. But arcades have popped up somewhere else, and that's what happens. I think that business communities evolve, and State Street is doing that. Are we in a little bit of a lull? Yeah, sure we are, a little bit, but I'm not worried because this has happened on State Street over the last, apparently 100 and some years, according to Susan, and we bounce back, and then we adapt, and we're different, and we're new, and I think it's important to remember that when these developments happen, not every big development gets an okay. And I think that it's important to remember that these guys have gone back and changed their design many, many times. And I'm in support of these kind of developments when they include the community as much as they have. So that's it.
Thank you for your comments. Heather, are there any other individuals wishing to speak?
There are not.
Okay. We do have one, Harper Zong, in support, but he does not want to speak, but is available to answer questions. So with that, I will ask the Plan Commission, do they have any questions for any of the registrants? Yes, Commissioner Fernandez.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Cantrell. This is probably for Tom Newyar, but maybe someone else in the staff. Do you have I was pleased to see multiple entrances on State Street and flexibility in the floor plan, intending to accommodate some smaller retail business. Do you have some target businesses or any clear idea of what is likely to be able to afford this space and occupy those commercial spaces?
Well, I'm not Core's leasing representative, but I would say that one of the things that this project design has done is to limit the depth of these stores. And, you know, a lot of stores, especially like the former Room of One's Own, extremely deep, probably went back 130 feet from the sidewalk. Well, you get a store that deep, and you're talking about a leasable area that becomes very expensive for a small retailer to occupy. So the other thing I'd say about the design is that the facade along State Street, as it bends on Gorham Street, is articulated into many different little entries, which again favors small retailers. I know that Core has reached out to tenants that have relocated elsewhere from the block. They're busy absorbing their new quarters right now, but I think that Core has shown that it's interested in having some of these old businesses come back once this project is done. I'm not sure that fully responds to your question.
Is there anyone from the development team that can further answer Commissioner Fernandez's question?
Yes, well, if I could have Rob Bach would be able to answer those.
Okay. Mr. Bach, can you respond?
Yes, looks like I'm unmuted. Well, so we do have, just over 20,000 square feet of retail, both on State Street and then on Broome as well. So, a good amount of retail, and we think this is excellent retail. So we at Core really look at retail as, obviously we're studying State Street, but also as an extension of, kind of our amenity offering for our students. So, of our residents. So it's really going to be a mix of, could potentially be food and beverage, could be traditional soft goods retailers. But we're really hoping that we can attract local tenants, folks who have operated along State Street or throughout Madison, to our space when we ultimately deliver, if it meets their business plan. And to speak a little bit more on the incubator that we're proposing. So we're still, working through how much space that ultimately is going to be, but have had really good conversations with 100 State, which is already up and running in Madison. They've got a project just down the State Street, closer to the Capitol. They're very interested in potentially expanding into this space, and so we're having really great internal conversations on, all the opportunities that might come to fruition with the incubator space. We're really excited about that, and we'll continue to work through what that program ultimately looks like. As we continue on in the process. So I think it'd be a really, really great opportunity there.
Thank you. Does that answer your questions, Commissioner Fernandez?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions by the commission? Yes, Commissioner Hagenow. Sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. I am wondering if Brian Munson could take us just a couple of quick minutes to finish his discussion there. He kind of got cut off on his part.
Okay, Brian, could you further elaborate on your comments?
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that. The last two items beyond sustainability, as I mentioned, usable open space and stormwater management are really items that are critical components downtown. And this project, as one of the other justifications for extra height, has incorporated usable open space on multiple levels, including some really signature designs. I think the landscape architect did a fantastic job of creating unique spaces on the rooftops for the residents, and at the same time, significantly exceeding the stormwater management requirements by almost a factor of 3. The final piece I was going to mention was that retail incubator that Rob mentioned. They're having conversations with 100 State about. And the goal of that was to really offer up an opportunity to where retail tenants could set up a new business here and kind of graduate over time up to State Street. The design of the incubator and the retail spaces really celebrate those walkable streetscapes and are designed to create opportunities for smaller scale businesses that could then graduate and move up to State. But even if they don't, they offer really great amenities for the residents and take advantage of that unique walking district that we've got. We want to see as much vibrancy on that street as possible. And so, those retail pieces become part of not just activating the building, but activating the entire neighborhood. So really, those were the last 2 items. I appreciate the chance to come back. We talk a lot about precedent with a project like this, and we like to think this is a very positive precedent. This is exactly how the city could ask future applicants to approach requests that exceed the height guidelines. The development's made whole, the community gets significant assets into the future between tax base and the affordable housing components. There's just a lot of positives that come out of a project like this. And again, we really appreciate all the interface with the Urban Design Commission, the city staff, the alders, the steering committee. As you've heard, this has been a year-plus iterative process. There have been substantial changes made to the building, and that really shines through in a project that's benefited from the process. And so just a last close there, just as a thank you to everybody who's been involved all along the way.
Thank you, Brian. Any other follow-up, Commissioner Hagenaut? No, okay.
Thank you.
Alder Heck.
Thank you. I think Alder Bennett was in the queue before me, if that's okay.
Okay, sure. Alder Bennett.
Hi, I'd like to ask a question to Elizabeth McDonald.
Okay.
Yeah, just give you a minute.
Hi there.
Okay, sweet. Hi, Elizabeth. What really compelled me to ask you about this was how you have gained 469 signatures in opposition to this development. I just wanted to ask you a bit more about what led you and organizers to send out this petition, and how did you go about gathering signatures?
Yeah, great question, Alder Bennett. Thank you. So I actually started to gather. I created this petition because I actually lived in Domain, which is right across the street from the proposed site, for 2 years. And I was forced to move because I could no longer afford the rents. I don't think a lot of the public knows that quite often in these buildings, the rent goes up every year, usually by a factor of a couple $100s. So with the pandemic and being a student, I couldn't afford that any longer. So I started to send out this petition on the infamous UW memes for milk chugging teens Facebook page. And I think there are several thousand students, alumni, and members of the greater Madison community alike that were a part of that, that are a part of that page. And it very quickly gathered signatures. I think we went from 0 to 250 the first time I posted something about it, and then 200 to 300, and then it's just gone up over time. And I've only posted twice, and then once one of my friends posted as well. So that's how we gathered the signatures. We also would like to, we've tried to explore avenues through formal means in the city, and we've come up against several barriers in terms of legal mechanisms, including a protest petition. It's nearly impossible, and to have a a notary with us to notarize each and every signature of the registered electors, which I find highly unfair. But that's going back to your original question, Alder Bennett. The original method was through the online student groups, and I can't express enough how quickly we gathered those 469 signatures in a matter of, I would say, in total 72 hours over a series of 3 postings over 3 months.
Yeah, that's wild to me, actually. And I guess that also leads me to question, as like a former resident of a development of this magnitude, having like lived in the domain, and that experience of having to move out because you can no longer afford it. I share that experience as well with a different core spaces development in the James. So I wanted to ask, because this development does include that land use agreement, which has the low cost component. I know you said like that isn't enough. Could you expand more upon that, and what like would be enough?
Yeah, so I think what constitutes as enough would be a higher percentage of beds. I think that personally, I think the developer is holding these desirable components hostage in exchange for the additional height. And having lived in domain, I can personally attest to, I don't know the specific figures, that I can only attest to the fact that I overlooked Ovation. My apartment overlooked the Capitol, and it overlooked Ovation apartment buildings. And I would say most on a standard night over the 3 years that I lived there, easily half of the building's facade was dark, and because people just simply weren't living there, and it was always the same apartment. I mean, it was always the same apartments. And then in my building, we had a host of problems with the infrastructure because it did go up so quickly. I don't know the specific time period in which Domain was constructed, and I know it's a different developer, but it does seem to be a theme amongst these buildings. They go up quickly, and there's a host of infrastructure problems. We had when I moved out in July of 2021, I was notified by my landlord to plan ahead because there would be 85 units in a approximately 330 unit apartment building moving out on the same weekend. And that was because we were having the infrastructure problems, and people simply just could not afford it any longer in a pandemic. A lot of my neighbors were in the same boat as me. So in terms of why myself and the petition I wrote and the supporters of the petition think that this is not enough, I think that it sets a dangerous precedent for the city. I think that once we alter the height for this building, I think it will allow further developers to also ask the same of the city. And I think that it's not, it's simply just not, if CORE was truly committed, in my opinion, to solving the affordable housing crisis, because I personally think that we have an affordable housing crisis, not necessarily a housing crisis in the city, I think that they would not hold that hostage. I think they would commit to hire a large number of beds at the 40% discount, and without hinging it on the additional height.
Sweet. Thank you so much, Elizabeth.
Yeah, thank you so much, Alder Bennett. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Alder. Heather, do you have something, any comments?
Just,
oops, sorry. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. We do have one more late registrant, and we can listen to that registrant whenever you'd like, but just prior to the closure of the public hearing, wanted you to know that.
If it's okay with Alder Heck, we'll take the registrant now. Can you
Yes, the registrant is Will Oshowitz of East Quorum Street in support.
Okay,
Hi.
Will, you have 3 minutes.
Yes, thank you. I've been paying attention to this and I've been meaning to comment on it, but the developer kept deferring it, so I didn't see that it was coming up on the agenda for this meeting. I would just like to say that I think that we shouldn't let perfect be the enemy of good. I think it would be good if core spaces provided more affordable units, but preventing 1,000 beds from being built in the city is not going to help the affordable housing crisis at all. It's just going to result in there being 1,000 fewer places for students to sleep. In addition, in the petition, one of the things that I personally find really egregious is there's a point in here about how this is going to increase parking, and they're asking for the developer to build more parking spaces. As a person, I was a student at Madison not long ago. I did not own a car. I don't think it makes sense to both, on one hand, advocate for affordable housing, and on the other hand, demand that the developer spend more on parking, and by proxy, the students who live in those apartments pay more for parking that they may or may not use. So really just want to say, I don't think we should let perfect be the enemy of good. And I think this is a good way to redevelop the State Street District. Thank you.
Thank you, Will. Alder Heck.
This is probably for Brian Munson. I'm not sure who on the development team. When we had our many discussions of the Hub 2 proposal on Langdon Street, we spent a lot of time talking about, I think we called them security plans. And I realize that's a different neighborhood, even though nearby, but I'm not seeing mention of your security plans for OLIV, and maybe you can tell me something about that.
Sure. It was a bit of an oversight in the submittal that it didn't get included. I think, as you recall, for the Hub 2, there's a very detailed security plan, move-in plan, and Rodney King would be able to add that as well, add to that as well. But in talking with Alder Revere prior to the meeting, that's something that we would be happy to supply as well.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure that had been a topic of conversation and that there was such a plan in existence.
Brian, I have one question for you. Are these units, I'm assuming, furnished?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions for the registrants? Yes, Commissioner Fernandez.
Thank you, Chair. The one little sticking point for me, I've heard many people attest to the wonderful collaborative process here, which sounds great. And then I have a very credible person with 400 signatures saying that the process was not collaborative and it was closed and it was difficult. Does anyone on the development team have insight into why that kind of stark different view of this might be the case?
I can't speak to the speaker's comments. What I can speak to is the process itself, and I think probably another good group that could answer this as well are the chairs who spoke tonight in favor of the project. So both Amal and Tim Camps were on speaking in favor of the project and the process. We've been meeting extensively with the committee over the course of better part of a year. It's been almost 9 months, including numerous meetings with the steering committee to discuss specific topics throughout. So we've had conversations about the design, we've had conversations about the height, before the UDC, after the UDC, numerous meetings, all on Zoom, all available and coordinated through the steering committee. Some of the meetings did get pushed back because we had to work through the details of the affordability agreements. Those were very complex agreements that, quite honestly, we had to work closely and collaboratively with the UW and the city to create a tool because none existed. The typical approach to affordable housing doesn't apply necessarily when we're talking about students. So we had to create a whole new set of agreements, and we really appreciate the efforts the city took. But to get through that meant that we had to delay some of the meetings. We didn't have a final MOU or a final agreement, so we didn't want to waste steering committee members' time. So that led to a couple meetings being postponed and rescheduled. But again, we met over the course of more than 9 months. We've had general neighborhood meetings. We've had steering committee meetings. So it's been a very comprehensive process. Having done planning in the city of Madison for more than 20 years, this one probably has had more neighborhood meeting input than most projects that I'm aware of or have worked on in the past. So, really, I think I'm not sure where the disconnect is, but I think the strongest endorsement of the process was the fact that the two chairs of the committee were here tonight speaking in favor.
Commissioner Fernandez, does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you.
Thank you. Alder Bennett.
Hi. Yeah. So I just wanted to direct that last question to Amal Goyal.
Okay. Amal?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I just wanted to address the comment that the neighborhood meetings were closed. I don't believe that is honest or correct to what actually happened with the steering committee. I do appreciate all of Elizabeth's concerns and disagreements with the project overall, but there were times when the developer's schedule and the schedule of the project meant that we could only provide like 6 days notice instead of 7 days notice for some of the meetings. But I don't think we've had any steering committee meeting with like less than 6 days notice sent out to a listserv of over 200 people where anyone could attend. We also advertised the meetings on the internet outside of the email listserv we had. And knowing that, there was a lot of variability in the time and duration of the meetings, we recorded all steering committee meetings and sent out the recordings to the listserv. So anyone at any time can get access to what discussions occurred on what aspect of the development. And my colleague Tim and I have also written down like comprehensive notes detailing what happened in those steering committee meetings in the report for you tonight. Now, I do very much share the feedback that Elizabeth has had, which is that this has taken a very long time, and it is just something to consider when we want to gather a very large and diverse range of opinions for a project such as this. When people have busy schedules, and particularly students, we have to take the initiative to reach out to them rather than having them reach out to us for these types of things happening in the city of Madison in these committees. And we as a neighborhood association believe that we have done the best we can toward that endeavor. And those students have access to the recordings at any time they want. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, for sure. And I was also hoping, if you'd like to, could you speak towards the MOU process and like negotiating that?
Right. So at the very beginning, the developers had stated that they were going to have this affordable housing component where they would designate 77 or so units sectioned off at a part of the building to be accessible for the workforce community or people who needed this affordable housing. Due to the feedback of one of the steering committee members, actually several of the steering committee members, they decided to integrate that throughout the building. But also due to the feedback of one of the steering committee members, there was a large emphasis on what the enforcement mechanism of this affordable component would be, knowing that, Core Spaces built the James, they built Hub 1, but both of those projects were then sold off to other management companies, and discussions about affordability could sort of fall through the cracks between management companies. So how are we going to ensure that there's continuity and an actual land use restriction agreement associated with this development? That's when the developers said, okay, let's create an MOU. And that is one of the main reasons sort of why the steering committee meetings were postponed and delayed, as well as the sort of presentation to the Plan Commission tonight was initially supposed to be in October, but now we're here. Over the course of meetings, we asked the developers to share other options than what they initially presented to us, where they would have 10% of the beds discounted 30% compared to what all the other beds would be, and talk to us about, if you were to really think about other off-campus housing options, which offer way lower rents but have slightly lower quality, what can you do, sort of playing around with the number of units, the percentage of the discount, and the availability of the program to make this program even better. So that's when they presented 3 different options at our very last steering committee meeting, or I think it was the second last steering committee meeting, I forget. No, sorry, this was the very last steering committee meeting, where they said we could have, 10% of the beds, sorry, well, I don't remember what the exact specific numbers were, but there was like 10% of the beds be at 40% of a discount, knowing that those beds would be in sort of 2+2 by 2 units. There was a discussion about having 95 beds at a 45% discount, knowing that those beds would be integrated throughout the different kinds of units. And then there was also another kind of option that I don't remember the percentages for, but the steering committee, most of the steering committee was inclined toward this option that is currently on the MOU, where we would only be looking at 10% of the beds in the 2x2+2 units, or 2+2 by 2 units at a 40% discount, because that seems to give the most value to the student demographic we're concerned about. So that is what the negotiations process was like. I mean, it's not necessarily consensus driven. It's just like, what, in the opinion of the steering committee representatives, would be most meaningful for the project. And I think that's what has come to fruition for you.
Thank you, Amal. Alder Bennett, do you have any other questions?
No, thank you very much, Amal. That was very insightful about how that process worked.
Yes, that was very insightful. Are there any other commission members that do have any questions for the registrants? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Do we have questions for staff? Yes, Alder Heck.
Thank you. This is probably for Heather, and it's a topic that's come up a lot about affordability. We'll call it low cost or affordability. I think we all realize that Plan Commission and the city can't require affordability in developments, and yet this has been coming up a lot, not just in public comment, but even in the staff report. There's mention of this agreement about low cost housing as a potential justification for the 2 extra stories. So what is the deal with our ability to consider this MOU and LURA with regard to the entire project, and in particular with regard to the 2 extra stories?
Sure. Thank you, Alder Heck. So importantly, the land use restriction agreement that was approved by the council is a completely separate agreement from the Plan Commission and eventually the council's decision of the requested rezoning to planned development. And so the council may not utilize the rezoning process as a way to condition the development with regard to the level of affordability that, in a sense, would be prohibited by state statute as a form of rent control. And so in this particular case, these are two separate decisions by the Common Council. One is already completed, the land use restriction agreement. And if the project moves forward, that agreement would hold for 30 years between the agreement between the developer and the city. But it's really important tonight that the Plan Commission not base your decision on any sort of a condition that there be a certain level of affordability within the project. I think that, as the developer mentioned, it is one of several items that they're putting forward as elements of the proposal that may not be able to move forward without the additional height that they're seeking. So, and the Plan Commission may consider that among other elements as they deliberate as to whether the additional 2 stories over and above what the downtown zoning would allow is something that the Plan Commission would like to support.
Thank you. That'll be a topic of discussion when we deliberate, I'm sure. Just one other question with regard to the demolition. I just want to clarify that Landmark's finding with regard to several of the proposed demolitions was what we call a red light finding by Landmarks. Isn't that correct? Not a green or a yellow?
That is correct. It was based on the February 2021 iteration of the project. And since that time, the development team has made significant changes along both Gorham and Johnson streets to basically pull back to commit to rebuilding the existing building facades, and B, to pull back upper stories of the building substantially back from those historic building facades so that they appear more to stand alone rather than having several stories just right on top of a 2-story facade. And so the Landmarks Commission weighed in on an earlier iteration, and the development team has continued to work with staff and also the Urban Design Commission on those design details. I think in your packet this evening, you have comments from the State Historic Preservation Office, and I was able to discuss this with our historic preservation planner this morning, who agrees that the strategies that have been put forward in the latest iteration are a creative way of incorporating the concerns that were raised by the Landmarks Commission back in February.
Okay, thanks so much for the answer. That completes my questions.
Any other questions that the commission may have for staff? Seeing none. Yes, Alder Bennett.
Hi, this is probably for Heather, but I was wondering if you could speak towards like the request to for the height limit change. I assume that's like what's being discussed tonight as well, and like if that's appropriate in this area, what's the impact of that?
Thank you. Heather.
Sure. So in the earlier step introduction, I did try to cover this, but perhaps quite quickly. So yes, I think that from the staff perspective, the request for 2 additional stories is one of the most significant issues that the Plan Commission should be focused on this evening. As mentioned earlier, in the plan development section of the zoning code, there is a specific standard, and I'll read it here. When applying the plan development standards to an application for height in excess of that allowed on the downtown height map, the Plan Commission shall consider the recommendation in adopted plans, and no application for excess height will be granted by the Plan Commission unless it finds that all of the following conditions are present. And then there are a number of conditions that the Plan Commission needs to focus on. Staff was able to find that many of these conditions are fairly clearly met. And I think the one that we drew attention to for the Plan Commission to consider is condition 2, that the excess height allows for a demonstrated higher quality building than could be achieved without the additional stories. And I, as staff, and then the applicant did provide the applicant provided their rationale for how they believe this was met. I think that also in the staff report, Chris Wells did a great job of comparing the proposed height to other buildings precedents that are in the area. If this were one of the tallest buildings, dwarfing buildings in the immediate vicinity, I think that we would have a stronger level of concern about the height that's being proposed. But as you can see in the staff report, there are comparisons showing a number of buildings in the area right around this one that are of similar or greater height. So those are some of the elements that are covered in the Plan Commission staff report, really grappling with this height issue. But again, I really do think it is one of the main elements that the Plan Commission will be focused on this evening.
Thank you, Heather.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions for staff? Seeing none, do we have a motion? Yes, Alder Revere, would you like to speak?
Yes, thank you very much, Chairperson Cantrell, and good evening to you and the Commission. I do appreciate the opportunity to share my thoughts on these applications prior to your discussion and consideration of a motion. Let me begin by where I began with my history with this application, and that it goes back all the way to the summer of 2020. I was first approached about this potential development back in the summer of 2020. We had our first detailed conversation in September of 2020 between myself and the development team, including the Core Spaces CEO, Mark Lifshin, someone I've worked with in the past on their other developments in downtown Madison. Immediately in that very first conversation, well over a year ago now, I identified affordability as being a key issue. Additional concerns that I identified right at the top were the treatment of existing retail tenants and sustainability. So I'd like to discuss those in a little more detail. As it relates to, let me take a couple of them out of order from where I just listed them, because affordability will take, I think, a longer conversation on my part. But as it relates to the existing retail tenants, I'm sure the commissioners are well aware that downtown Madison lost a couple of very beloved longtime downtown retailers as a result, in large part, to this proposal. Those, of course, being a room of one's own bookstore and community pharmacy. I had implored the development team to work with those existing local retail tenants to try to find them new homes downtown. And that commitment was made in our very first conversation. Specifically, they informed me that Tom Newyar had already begun working with those tenants about the future. And in fact, their leases and rents throughout the pandemic, if not before the pandemic, were structured as such. We additionally talked about the need for future retail tenants to be local first. I share the concern that was articulated by at least one, if not more than one registrant during the public hearing, that it's quite noticeable that the vast majority of retail tenants in the Core Spaces, other downtown developments, which admittedly they no longer own or operate, but are national establishments. Not that we don't welcome national retailers, to be sure, to State Street in downtown Madison, but it hasn't gone without notice. And then further, we talked about the idea of an incubator for retail space, something that CORE was experimenting with doing in another proposal or other proposals around the country. So unfortunately, of course, we lost room and we lost community pharmacy to the east side. I pray that someday one or both of them will be able to come back downtown with a second location or more. But I do want to acknowledge the fact that the majority of the tenants that are on this block that have faced relocation have successfully relocated in downtown Madison. And I want to acknowledge that at the top and appreciate that they found new homes and have been treated with respect and dignity by their existing landlords. And in particular, you heard that tonight from Canopy Dance Company. So I want to emphasize that point. But I do want to mark the loss of beloved local retail in this conversation. As it relates to sustainability, that's been covered as well in the public hearing. In large part, I won't repeat what was said. A personal interest of mine that some of you commissioners will recall from prior appearances I've had before you over the years is our urban forest, our urban tree canopy, and how we're losing that at an alarming rate because of the significant downtown development that we've all experienced. Development, which I will hasten to add, I've supported enthusiastically in almost every respect. But with that said, I do appreciate the importance of trying to have street trees that will survive the construction and future use on this block, and support the extensive green roof and outdoor open spaces that are in this application before you tonight. I want to acknowledge that the Urban Design Commission did include my recommendation to have structured soil used to give the street trees that are there a fighting chance, and moreover, the street trees that I should say that will be planted if this application is approved and the proposal built, and appreciate that condition is included in the staff report, and acknowledge that is the bailiwick of the Board of Public Works and the Common Council as part of the developers agreement that will be forthcoming in the new year. And so I do look forward to working with the development team and city staff on the specifics of that agreement, including the treatment of current and future street trees, because we are losing them at an alarming rate, and especially in the downtown, trees that are in grates just have an awful chance of survival unless structural soil is utilized, as we've seen the benefits of that over the last few years. Moving on to what I would say in large part has been the most significant issue for the community with this proposal, especially the UW-Madison student community, and that is the issue of affordability. There's no denying that this applicant's previous downtown developments that have been approved and built, the Hub and the James, are considered expensive luxury buildings by the student body. There's no denying that whatsoever. And I think that in large part has been CORE's business model since their founding. And I understand that they're trying to get away with that, which I very much appreciate them doing. Well, in that very first conversation with the CEO and others on the development team over a year ago, they immediately checked my temperature on the possibility of my support for exceeding the downtown height map on this block, and specifically said, how would you feel, Mike, about 2 additional stories at this early stage of consideration? And I responded something to the effect of, that would be a very tough sell for me. That would be difficult because so much time and effort, energy, especially on the part of unpaid downtown stakeholders, went into the development of the 2012 downtown plan. And the downtown height map was thought out and considered over a several year period in the development of the downtown plan. But they did have sound arguments, particularly as it relates to the height of neighboring buildings on adjacent blocks and in the immediate neighborhood. But what we discussed in that first meeting was, again, the importance of affordability. At that time, the Langdon Street proposal was still before you on the commission here. And what that ended up being was the land use restriction agreement that was approved overwhelmingly by the city council at our last meeting. I don't need to go into the specifics. It's obviously been discussed at some length during the public hearing. At this point, I do want to acknowledge and appreciate very much Commissioner Heck, Alderperson Heck's question of Planning Division Director Stouter in this regard. As I mentioned in the City Finance Committee discussion of the land use restriction agreement resolution, that is clearly and distinct and separate from the application that you commissioners have before you tonight. With that said, in that very first conversation, again, with Mark Lifshin and others, they discussed that they're under inclusionary zoning requirements in California and perhaps other locales where they have developed properties and are comfortable trying to explore some idea of affordability or lower cost housing as a part of this proposal. As you've heard from others tonight, I think that is the significant reason why this proposal has been referred so many times at Plan Commission public hearings over the last several months, clear in a way, trying to formulate the appropriate affordability, and I realize that word is not one that many would use to discuss the agreement that the Common Council approved, but that discussion of affordability took an extensive amount of time, putting it mildly, and there have been so many conversations in that regard, and I want to take at this moment to acknowledge Alderperson Bennett and the neighborhood activists from the Campus Area Neighborhood Association and Capital Neighborhoods Incorporated, the UW-Madison, especially their Office of Student Financial Aid, the development team and city staff, and all of their work over the last many months. I consider this land use restriction agreement that will allow for discounted beds to be set aside for a period of at least 3 decades to be groundbreaking. I really do. This lower cost housing for students, I hope, will be precedent setting for future student housing. I know that I would be really foolish to think that that's going to be the case, but I do want to identify the one area where we can make this work, and that is the potential redevelopment of our Lake Street parking garage, the State Street campus parking garage. Lake Street garage, as I'm sure you all are well aware, is scheduled for replacement over the next few years and hopefully replaced not only with new parking structure, but with mixed use development that most likely would certainly be student housing, as well as importantly an intercity bus terminal. And since the city will be the ones negotiating the air rights and picking, as the process is frankly underway, and selecting a private development partner there, I think it's imperative that this sort of agreement be at a minimum the starting point in those discussions with private developers on Lake Street and moving into the new year and beyond. The idea of student affordable housing has been exceedingly difficult for the city to grasp. Obviously, it goes without saying that when inclusionary zoning ordinance was ruled unconstitutional by the Wisconsin Supreme Court several years ago now, that those efforts became all the more difficult and problematic, to be sure. There was a housing strategy paper that city staff developed, 5 years ago now, that laid out the idea of working with the UW Office of Student Financial Aid and doing initial screening for potential affordable housing for students. And here we are 5 years later with that potential within grasp if this project is approved and built. So I'm thrilled by that. And again, I want to thank everyone for their work on this, not the least of which, of course, are the applicants. As it relates to exceeding the downtown height map, I want to acknowledge at this point the really wonderful work of the Urban Design Commission. So I want to thank Urban Design Commissioner and Alder Alvarez and his fellow commissioners for their excellent input and recommendations to this development team. As you heard during the public testimony, and I'm here to confirm that for you, Jeff Salisco and his fellow members of the design team, I think responded, and of course his clients responded exceedingly favorably to the very valuable input that UDC supplied them. And it really makes for a substantially better design. No offense, Jeff, to the initial design, but it really was, I think, a tremendous turning point. It improves on the pedestrian experience. It in a very important way, includes the historic facades of Madison's first automotive dealerships, something that Cora and I have worked on in their two previous proposals that were built here in downtown Madison, on a State Street facade and a West Gilman Street facade, the latter being also an original automobile dealership in our community. And so that was critical, and UDC's input in the integration of those historic facades and the adjacent treatment of the facade, I think is really a textbook example of the value of UDC. And again, I can't say enough good things about them because I know a lot of folks sometimes criticize their work, so I always like supporting them. But anyway, as it relates to the standards for excess height, as you all have heard, UDC did recommend nearly unanimously, overwhelmingly, I will say, that the standards for excess height could be met, were met with the design that you have before you this evening. And I think that is significant. It was significant for me to have the comfort level and be able to sleep well at night to come before you tonight and ask that you indeed find that the plan development standards, zoning map amendment standards are met and support this rezoning and the demolition permit standards and the demo permit application and the CSM. So let me say a few things here in closing additionally about this proposal, if I might, and appreciate your willingness to hear me out. This proposal is not something that, as you heard from Elizabeth McDonald tonight, is not something that is universally embraced. I can sit here and tell you that she by far is not the only member of the community that has concerns about the proposal and where it sits tonight. I will say that the change.org petition was initially based on a great unknown about any so-called equitable housing or affordable housing in this proposal, and the vast majority of the signers of that did not have the knowledge that we have, through a lot of hard work, have come up with a proposal that I think is quite an improvement over the initial idea of lower cost beds being set aside in this development. There are others, though, besides Elizabeth, that should be acknowledged and chose not to be heard tonight, that have expressed concerns about the excess height and are frustrated that they participate in the downtown planning process and feel that what's the point of a downtown plan if it will be ignored as it relates to height, extra height in particular. And I get that, and I appreciate that, and acknowledge their thoughts. I really do, and want that to be known here in the record. I think that the addition of these 1,100 residents will really be a significant catalyst for the recovery of our downtown and the greater State Street area. It will clearly, the extensive property tax base will clearly be enough of a initiative for us in city government to develop another State Street tax in the plan, in the works, acknowledged in our recently adopted capital budget for the new year, that in the new year, city staff will be proposing a new State Street tax incremental finance district that will again be largely initially supported by this development if it is approved and built. And that is significant for downtown and especially State Street's recovery. As you heard from downtown merchants tonight, I want you to know that they are not in the minority. This proposal, I should say, has been discussed in numerous downtown stakeholder settings outside of the Neighborhood Association steering committee process, including at Greater State Street Business Association meetings and Downtown Business Improvement District Board meetings. And there is overwhelming support amongst the small mom and pop State Street merchants for this proposal, with very few exceptions. In fact, I can't think of anyone in particular that's reached out to me or I've heard in a meeting express opposition to this really monumental proposal being added to the State Street landscape. I think it is important, though, to acknowledge that there are many in the community that believe that this proposal, if approved and built, will detract from the character of State Street in terms of the height, despite the fact that the buildings are the majority of the height is required to be stepped back, despite the fact that it's a 3-story facade proposed on State Street. And I appreciate that change being made by the development team as opposed to the 4 stories that they are permitted under the downtown height map. But there are some that certainly, as I'm sure all of you have experienced when you have friends or family visiting our community for the first time after a many-year absence and have seen the transformative nature of our downtown landscape, and particularly as it relates to the height of buildings, that it is breathtaking and jaw-dropping for folks, for example, that attended school here and haven't been back for many years when they see this sort of height that we have permitted and really encouraged in downtown Madison. So as it relates to that additional downtown density, something that shows no signs from the development community of believing that can be absorbed, whether it be student housing or non-student housing. I want to acknowledge further that this proposal before you, unlike the vast majority of downtown multifamily projects that have been approved by this commission over the last few years, does not require the removal of a single residential housing unit. So going back to the affordability concern, unlike a very substantial student housing oriented proposal that's scheduled for your first meeting of the new year in January at Bassett and Johnson Streets, which will require the removal of existing low cost apartments, this one does not. There are no residential units that will be removed as a result of this proposal being approved and built. And I appreciate that and want to acknowledge that further. And then lastly, I want to further acknowledge and appreciate that the applicant has pledged that they plan to own and operate this multifamily building for the long term, that their business model has changed. Unlike the Hub and the James, they do not plan on flipping these properties fairly quickly after a certificate of occupancies were granted to them, and do plan to maintain these buildings for the long term, which I think is critical. With that said, and appreciate Alderperson Heck as well, noticing that the staff report did not mention what I consider to be a pretty important and yet not precedent-setting condition. I do urge the commission tonight to add an additional condition of approval that would require the submission of a detailed management plan for the property that would be required to be approved by the Planning Division. Planning Division Director Stouter and I had this conversation earlier, and she is prepared, if any of you are interested, at the appropriate time to sharing her screen and seeing the language that has been developed. It is language that's been used in the past and specifically covers 7 key areas that I, as you heard Brian Munson respond to during the course of the public hearing, his clients have no objection to, but it covers move-in, move-out plans, parking management plans, trash and snow management, the management of common areas, including the important rooftop areas, security plan in conjunction with MPD, building management staff, hours and plans, and finally guest policy for the residential aspects of the development once it's open. So with that, again, my thanks to all that have worked so hard well over a year now on getting us to where we are today, and certainly appreciate your willingness to hear me out and allow me to cover all these many topics, and obviously urge your support of the application with each of the staff conditions and the additional condition I just articulated. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alder Revere. Commissioner Fernandez.
Thank you, Chair. Is a question for Alder Revere out of order at this point?
No, I will allow it. Go ahead.
Thank you. So, I think I understand the subtleties by which, the affordable housing in this building is a separate issue, and we may not be able to directly consider that a benefit of the additional stories. But I also heard discussion of the tax increment that this is going to result in being able to be applied to affordable housing in some way. Is there such a proposal? Is that simply speculation at this point? Can you speak to how that tax increment might also result in some additional affordable housing?
Yes, thank you very much, Commissioner Fernandez. One reason why I am so enthusiastic about the creation of another State Street tax incremental finance district, and we have not had this greater State Street area covered by a TID in many years now. But as you probably remember, Tony, from your work in City Engineering Division, most all of the improvements that we were able to make to the State Street area in the public right-of-way were in large part thanks to the ability of TIF funding. And as I'm sure most all of you know as well, the state statute relating to tax incremental financing specifically allows additional year of expenditures to be spent specifically for affordable housing, and that can be any place within the municipality. But I hope that beyond just waiting several years into the future and saying that, we'll use this additional year to capture increment to fund affordable housing citywide, that the city will choose to prioritize other potential affordable housing proposals in the downtown area. There really have been very few examples, I hate to admit, of TIF being used for downtown housing in the past. Madison Mark was the first and best example of that, between the building there, for those aren't familiar, is between East Wilson and King Streets. But we've used it very seldom. Of course, since that time, we have a fairly robust affordable housing fund that has largely encouraged affordable housing development throughout the city. But given the substantial land costs and construction costs downtown, it very seldom has been tapped to be utilized for downtown affordable housing proposals. I hope that will change, and that the creation of a greater State Street TIF district will allow for that to happen in the future. But it is important as well to note that the creation of the State Street TID will really help local mom and pop retailers, hopefully with grants, as we have used our previous State Street TIF district revenue in that respect. So it really will help with recovery in that way as well.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for asking.
Thanks. Yes, Alder Bennett.
I guess a question to Heather. I was wondering, can we base this decision off of TID as well?
No, I mean, this does lie within a tax incremental district, but it really, it isn't relying on TIF. I think what Alder Verveer is alluding to, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, but the value that this will bring and the incremental value to this tax incremental district will be valuable for the city for years to come. And that increment could be used to support future affordable housing projects. Alder Verveer, if you want to nod or add more, please indicate if you'd like to add more to that. Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. With that, do we have a motion here? Yes, Alder Revere. Would you like to comment? Oh, did I mute you or what? Where are you at? Can you raise your hand? Oh, good. Thank you. Yes, Alder Revere.
Thank you. Boy, it was frustrating. Paul runs a tight ship within the media team on these meetings. I was not allowed to mute myself. Anyway, yeah, thank you. I just want to concur. Thank Alderperson Bennett for the clarification question. That Heather certainly, in a very articulate way, summarized the point I was trying to make. I just wanted to concur that was correct.
Thank you, Alder. Okay, I'm looking for a motion here. Commission members? Yes, Commissioner Soldheim.
All right, I had to write this one down. It's long. I move that the Plan Commission find that the demolition standards and plan development standards are met, and forward the zoning map amendment for 341 State Street, 315 through 321 Gorham, and 322 West Johnson Street to the Common Council with a recommendation of approval, subject to the conditions of the staff report and with the additional condition of submittal of a detailed management plan to be approved by the planning director.
Thank you. Do we have a second to the motion? Yes, second by Commissioner Shepard. Commissioner Soldheim, would you like to speak to your motion?
Yes, I just wanted to say I really appreciate the group effort among everyone involved in this proposal. Of course, you're never going to, get something that's perfect for everyone. But I think, we've seen this referred many, many times. I've seen it on the agenda. And I think the extra time that was taken really shows in this proposal. It's not easy to substantiate the extra stories for a development like this. It's something that we have struggled with in a couple of proposals, but I think that the development team has articulated several features within this that help substantiate that. Specifically, compatibility with the surrounding area. There are a lot of even taller buildings in the near vicinity of this project, so I am comfortable with that, particularly with the 3-story height on State Street. I think that makes a big difference. In terms of providing a higher quality building, the features that stood out to me were the green and sustainability features. Again, that 3-story height on State Street, and also preservation of the facades, which is really a substantial and expensive feature of the development, but I think very critical in moving this forward. And in terms of the viewshed impacts, I think that the design changes that were made with a lot of work from UDC have really helped with achieving that item within the additional height limits. So I would also say that State Street, is evolving, as one of the speakers alluded to. It's easy to feel nostalgic about some of the businesses we felt in the past, but I think that this is a really good proposal for this block. They've come a long way since the proposal was first brought forth, and I really appreciate all the work they put into it.
before we go to Alder Bennett, does Commissioner Shepherd, does he have any other comments that he would like to share? If not, I will go to Alder Bennett. Alder Bennett?
Hi. So I'm coming here just to give some of my thoughts. And I'm not going to speak direct opposition or in support of like this, what's in front of us today. I'll save whatever I come to when this comes to common council. The question that we really have to ask ourselves is, hold on, let me turn my video on. Is this additional height, is it a better building because we have additional height? In my opinion, I think that the building itself can maintain the same amount that they're offering without the 2 additional stories. And the 2 additional stories itself is largely based on the allowance of the low-cost housing component. When I think about it, I wonder, can this building offer components such as a green roof and a rooftop pool and hot tub if they didn't have the 2 additional stories? And I'd like to think that they could. I'd like to think that, like, I don't know, I think the 2 additional stories are largely based on additional revenue that they'll generate. And when I spoke about the land use agreement, I know that this decision can't be based on that, but I don't know. I kind of go back and forth with it when I have a petition of 469 people, largely students and alums, that are in opposition. When I have people, when I have students coming up to me, texting me about the development, asking me about it in interviews with the Badger Herald and Daily Cardinal, talking about it even during class time, it makes me, as a representative of the greater campus area, wonder, like, what is the impact of this development, and like how students have experienced these developments in former core spaces developments, such as the James and Hub. So I don't know. I don't want to like go too far into the land use agreement, but when I think about it, I don't know. I think the design also leaves something left to be desired, and it adds to this vertical column down West Gorham that we've seen in the past. So I don't know. I think when we talk about precedent, I guess the question that we should be asking is, like, is this setting the precedent of, like, if you want to invest in the city, you have to offer a low cost component? Or is this setting the precedent that if a developer wants 2 additional stories, they can get that if they offer this low cost component? So I think the building itself could be we could experience the same amount that we're getting out, like same or almost the same amount that we're getting out of the building without the 2 additional stories. But ultimately, I'm not fully there yet either way. Just wanted to put those thoughts out there.
Thank you, Alder Bennett. Alder Heck.
Thank you. and thanks to Alder Bennett for those comments. I'm a little bit torn on this supporting this motion, but for some of those reasons, but also from another angle, I'm concerned about the Landmarks Commission's recommendation concerning the historical nature of these buildings, even though, as Heather Stouter mentioned, there were some improvements in the design after that. And one of the main reasons is because of one of the recommendations in the downtown plan. And, our plans are supposed to inform our decisions about approving demolitions. And I'll read recommendation number 75 from the downtown plan on page 45. Encourage the preservation, rehabilitation, and adaptive reuse of sound older buildings that contribute to the district's character. And it's great that the proposal is to save the facades of several of the most historic buildings. I would really miss the building where Red Rocks is currently located. I think that's an amazing building with a ton of character. And I feel the same way about the other buildings, and pulling the facade off and then rebuilding it is a step in the right direction, but it also, to me, is a little bit lacking. And it seems to be something that we're okay with doing fairly often. So I just hope we can think that through in the future. I actually think that the rationale for the 2 extra floors is novel, and I appreciate it and support it. In the past, I think we've been fixated on, do the 2 extra stories make this a visually more appealing building somehow? And that's a tall order. Oh, I guess that's a good pun. It's really hard for us to judge that. Urban design might be able to, but the standards of approval related to 2 extra stories, I think we've been fixated on, is it a better building? And it's very clever, I think, what they've done by pulling it back from State Street. The step back is a great move. And I think that including the lower cost housing is a great move. And those are good justifications for the 2 extra floors. But I mostly wanted to talk about, I'm still concerned about the demolitions. Thanks.
Is there anyone else on the commission that would like to speak? If not, if the commission, oh, yes. Commissioner Fernandez.
I'd just like to say very briefly, I really appreciate Commissioner Alderheck's comments and really came into this meeting very strongly feeling the same way. But I'm going to support this proposal, and I think that in terms of historic preservation, that was one of my main concerns. And is this a better building? This is a completely different building than any imaginable reuse of a 3-story building that is largely functionally obsolete. Given the times, given the demand for housing, given the growth in the city, given everything else, this is a vastly better building, but maybe not from a strictly architectural point. But let's say I've become convinced that this proposal is, in terms of the process that it's gone through, the type of historic preservation that's there to rebuild these facades rather than perhaps echo them in some way, but to actually rebuild. I see very strong commitment to building better. I have to say, maybe I'm not being very articulate, but I think that this is a better building, even though, because I don't really see the option for literally preserving the historic buildings without having something very inferior to this in many other respects in terms of providing needed housing, et cetera. So anyway, I just like to say that I've become convinced through this discussion and really appreciate the tremendous input that everyone has provided.
Thank you, Commissioner Fernandez. Anyone else? If not, if the commissioners are in favor, I would like to speak to the motion, if that's okay. I think that this has been a really good process, and when this project was first announced, I was pretty skeptical of the project, just like I think Alder Revere, but I think over the course of the 9 months or more, this project has evolved, and I think that it's turned out to be a very good project. I think the step backs from State Street, the preservation of the facades of the building, the architecture, which I think, the judge of the architecture is by the Urban Design Committee, and I think that that their resounding support of the design, I think, is important here. The affordability component that has been built in, the sustainability elements, the open space that's far and above what's required, and again, the 3 stories along State Street, I think, is very important. They could have proposed a 4-story. And I think that would have been out of place, at least in this block. So I think the additional height is justified here. And again, I've been on the Plan Commission for probably 10 years now. I was involved with the downtown plan. I was involved with lots of developments, reviews, the ovation, the domain, and I think this building is very consistent in height with the surrounding, and very compatible with the height of the other projects within this area. So and lastly, we want housing. We need housing. We want housing where it's appropriate, and I think that in the heart of State Street, this is exactly where it should be. And again, I think it's a good project, and I would hope the commission members might support it. Thank you. With that, unless there's any other commission members who would like to speak, I will consider that we have, unless you object to the motion. Let's see. If you object to the motion, raise your hand. If not, I'll assume unanimous consent. So can we have a motion in a second? Can you vote, please? I see no raised hands. I'll assume unanimous consent. Thank you very much. I'll move on to the last item on our agenda, and it's item number 19. Legistar 68079. It's a substitute ordinance amending tables 28C-1, 28D-2, and 28E-2 to change the accessory dwelling units from a conditional use to a permitted use on all districts. Amend table 28G1 to allow ADUs in agricultural districts. Amend MGO 28.151 to change required standards for ADUs, amending Madison General Ordinance 28.131 to change the maximum area per lot and maximum size of ADUs, amending the Madison General Ordinance 28.211 to clarify the definition of ADUs, and repealing Madison General Ordinance 29.26 allowing attached dwelling units to be smaller than 500 square feet. Do we have a staff presentation?
We do not for this evening, but I do have the slides shared with you on November 8th at the ready, should there be any questions, and should any commissioner want to see some visuals.
Thank you. Do any of the commission members want to see any visuals? Or I'll open the public hearing. We have three speakers, or at least people wanting to speak. Spencer Garnett, Luann Lane, Madison, Wisconsin, in support. You have 3 minutes.
Hi, thanks, Bradley. Yeah, I just wanted to speak in support of changing ADUs from conditional to permitted. Housing demand has been very high in Madison for quite some time. And I think as we've heard from everyone this night, housing is something that's desperately needed. Costs are climbing higher and higher. And then now we have, inflation nationwide. And I think that something just really needs to be done to alleviate this. And I think making ADUs a permitted use, while it's not much, I think it is a good positive first step towards more housing. And I also wanted to mention that they're very much like a green form of housing as infill housing. They don't require as much infrastructure to be built.
Okay.
And then
Go ahead.
Yeah. And then lastly, I just wanted to add that I think they're great tools for like diversifying neighborhoods. They add a lot of character and diversity, and I think I, for one, appreciate that. And I would strongly implore the commission to approve ADUs for permitted use.
Okay, well, thank you for your comments. The next speaker is Kara Kaufman on Monroe Street in Madison in support. You have 3 minutes.
Hi, I just have a really brief comment. I really appreciate that this ordinance change was proposed because anything that increases housing options in our growing city is something Madison really needs. So I totally support this, and I would love to see more ADUs in my neighborhood. So I hope that happens. Thanks.
Thank you. The next speaker is Will Ochowicz on East Gorham Street in Madison in support. You have 3 minutes. Will.
Hello again, commissioners. I'm just calling in today to strongly urge the Plan Commission to vote in favor of this change. It's a simple way to make housing more affordable. And I did email Alder Heck earlier in the week, but my only concerns are that it could go further by eliminating the owner occupancy requirement by making this a by right process. I will say, as part of this, I live in the tiny Lapham neighborhood, which has 3 of the 12 ADUs that Madison has. I did knock on one of the doors and talk with one of the owners. One of the things that she said that stuck with me is that she said it was really difficult going through the conditional use process. She said that she's also, people come up to her frequently and ask her about her ADU. And so I do want to say that making the planning process easier, that word will get around. And if you can make it easier for people to build ADUs, there's going to be this sort of network effect of your neighbor built an ADU and said, hey, this was pretty easy. It's going to help increase the amount of housing that we can build in our city for free for the city. You don't need to put any public funds towards this. As far as parking, like I said before, I would hate to see any housing be stopped because of parking. Not everyone has a car, not everyone needs a car, and not everyone wants to live in a city where a car is a requirement or wants to own a car. And I say this as someone who parks on the street every day. So let's not put cars before housing. I think that's it. Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you. That's our last speaker. Do we have any questions for any of the registrants? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Do we have any questions for city staff? Yes, Commissioner Fernandez.
Thank you. As usual, I do. Sorry to drag this out, but I did read the comment letter from Lenhertz. Don't recall the first name. And let me just say in advance, I'm in support of this ADU change and in ADUs in general. But I was a little bit taken aback to find out that many properties in the city, it wouldn't be applicable because of covenants on those properties. Now, I didn't read with great detail, but it seemed like the writer had gone into considerable detail in determining this. Is this true? Does this mean if someone were even to come to us with a proposal to rezone, for example, into multifamily, that would be prohibited by the covenant on that property? Those covenants, do we have to respect those? I have a covenant on my property. I found out that prohibits it ever being rented or owned by a person of color, and I know that thankfully has long since been struck down. But what's the nature of this restriction, and is it widespread, and is it a concern?
Matt Tucker, would you like to comment?
Sure. So the answer, Commissioner Fernandez, is we don't really know, because we don't know if covenants are still valid. We don't know if they have expired. We don't get involved in any matters related to covenants, because covenants are private restrictions that are applied to property, and the members of the subdivision or the parties that have rights to those covenants are the ones that are responsible for enforcement, taking action, or otherwise. It's basically a private restriction, and we do not track them. We do not enforce them. We don't know.
Do you have any other question?
Follow-up for Matt. Just a quick follow-up. Matt, do we have the ability to prevent those types of covenants on future subdivisions?
We do not. Those are private legal agreements that people would get into. There are covenants that are illegal, like you mentioned, the one that you had. There are covenants that create some complications with state law, like there's covenants that I've come across that prohibited or regulated solar that's allowed. It really becomes a legal matter between property owners choosing to enforce or those covenants. They're very much private restrictions.
Okay. Any other questions for staff? Seeing none, I hopefully have to close the public hearing now. Do we have a motion? Yes, Alder Heck.
Thank you. I'll move that we recommend to Common Council that they approve the substitute to this ordinance change relating to accessory dwelling units, amending tables from a conditional use to a permitted use, and the associated changes that are mentioned in Legistar.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Second by Commissioner Shepard. Alder Heck, would you like to speak to your motion?
Just very briefly, thanks. I would encourage folks to support this. A lot of thought and work has gone into this, and I want to thank Matt Tucker and Heather in particular, and other staff that contributed. I know I really think this is an important step forward, and it's just a start, really. As you heard in some public comment, I think we need to now facilitate knowledge about ADUs, and we've approved on council a small pilot program to provide financial assistance for building an ADU for folks who aren't able to get access to traditional financing. So I think it's just the beginning, and it's an important step forward. Thanks.
Thank you. With that, we have a motion to approve in a second. I'll assume A unanimous, unless I see a raised hand, I'll assume that the motion is approved. I see no raised hands, so the motion passes unanimously. Okay, that ends the meat part of the agenda. Business by members. Do we have any business by members? Seeing no raised hands. Secretary's report. Heather.
Thank you, Chair Cantrell. I'll start by mentioning again at our December 9th meeting, which is a special meeting, we'll have two updates for the Plan Commission. One will be a relatively brief update on transit-oriented development, but diving into a few example sites and trying to iterate on this process of how the transit-oriented development overlay might move forward. And then the second item is a return of the Mansion Hill Local Historic District and ways we may approach some zoning changes to better accommodate or fit in with the historic preservation ordinance within that area. And so we'll be providing information to commissioners in about probably a week and a half or so in advance of that December 9th meeting to cover those two topics. On December 13th, I'll mention one special item we'll have on that agenda is a discussion and a vote on our 2022 meeting format. And so we'd love to hear from commissioners with regard to whether we would like to remain in this virtual environment or get back to an in-person setting. And so if you can give that some thought as individuals in the coming weeks, that would be great. We'll have that discussion and a vote on December 13th. Also, not showing up on this agenda, but we anticipate the return of the South Madison plan to the Plan Commission. It's been moving through boards, committees, and commissions. We do still have a few more to go, but anticipate that that will be back before you on December 13th. And I'll mention a couple other projects for that evening. 5817 Halley Way and 5818 Gemini Drive on the far east side, planned development to construct both a 99-unit apartment building and 12 townhouse units. And that's really the main one that I'll mention on that agenda. And then looking down to the January 10th meeting, we will have on Midvale and Seago, we will have an expanded planned development to the Hilldale Shopping Center to include additional commercial hotel and residential uses. And then further down on the agenda, a major project on the 500 block of West Johnson Street, North Bassett and Conklin Place that involves a demolition and conditional use for a 12-story, 144-unit apartment building. And then let's see. I think those are the main ones that I'll mention for the January 10th meeting. And finally, I just want to thank you all for sticking with us this evening and hope everyone has a great holiday later this week. Thank you.
Are there any announcements by the commission? Seeing none, I'm looking for a motion to adjourn. Do we have a motion here? Yes, Commissioner Sampan. Do we have a second? Second by Commissioner Shepherd. Assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand. I'm assuming you're not raising your hand, Commissioner Spencer. No, good. Well, the motion was approved unanimously. Thank you all for putting up with me. So see you next time.